Chapter 101. We don't have that much money to support a mercenary company right now, Gregor Clegane said. Mercenary companies are for making money, Sir, Jane said, carefully spreading honey on Lord Tywin's bread. All right, Gregor said. Sir Gregor, our 100-man cavalry costs 100 gold dragons a month in wages. We don't have the money. And there's the care of the horses, the food supplies that must be stockpiled in advance for the winter, everything costs money. The lords at the table laughed. Lord Osgood laughed. Sir Gregor, you've married a good woman. Of course. I told her last night that she can't get up later than me or go to bed earlier than me. All the affairs of the house, income and expenses, are all up to her, Gregor laughed. Lord Marbrand laughed. Sir Gregor, so what do you do? Nothing. I'm responsible for protecting her and the safety of the territory, Gregor said. If anyone bullies her or the Cleganes, I'll beat them up. I'm the commander of the Clegane mercenary company hired by Lady Jane. The nobles from the west returned after attending Gregor and Jane's wedding. It was a beautiful morning. In the north, it was already time to wear fur coats and moleskin gloves, but in the west, it was as warm as spring. Except for a bit of cold in the morning, after breakfast, the temperature rose steadily. This was already the 9th year of the long summer. Apart from the extreme cold in the north, the rest of the land was blessed with good weather and sufficient rainfall, and the nobles had plenty of grain reserves. The first crop of rice in the west was half ripe. Walking on the official road north of Casterly Rock, the view was endless, surrounded by fields of light yellow rice. A major road led directly from Casterly Rock to many cities in the north of the west. The northernmost part of the west was surrounded by mountains. North of the mountains was the sea, and not far from the sea was a famous group of islands. The Iron Islands. To the east of the mountains were the mountains of the Riverlands, without mountain roads, desolate and uninhabited. The northern nobles, dressed in light clothes and small hats, travelled along the official road, their laughter carrying far in the sky. 6 miles from the city, in the middle of the road, suddenly appeared 2 large banners. One was the banner of the Westerling territory. 6 white seashells against a yellow sandy background, and the other was the banner of the Clegane family. 3 black dogs on a yellow field. Under the banners, Gregor Clegane was fully armed, wearing a huge flat-topped helmet. His suit of red bronze armor gleamed in the sunlight. In this warm climate, wearing this suit of armor was very stuffy. Spread out across the road was Clegane's imposing red armored cavalry, no more, no less, a total of 86 men. On the side of the formation were 8 Westerling family guards lined up in a single column. They were completely lacking in presence compared to the Clegane cavalry. Gawain Westerling and Gregor Clegane were at the front of the formation. The entire road was blocked, and it seemed Gregor had no intention of giving way. The dozen or so northern nobles were all surprised, they all sensed something was wrong. Everyone was still eating breakfast in Lord Tywin's dining hall this morning. What did the mountain want to do? The cavalry behind Gregor all pointed their lances to the sky, raising dozens of rows of spears. These spears could be used for charging and thrusting, or as javelins for throwing. The most powerful noble in this group was Lord Marbrand of Ashmark. The Marbrand family sigil was a burning tree in orange flames, and their family motto was Burning Bright. Lord Marbrand's paternal aunt was Lord Tywin's mother, and he himself was a cousin of Lord Tywin. Lord Tywin was his first cousin. Lord Marbrand had a very heroic son named Adam Marbrand, who had come to Casterly Rock with his father to attend the wedding feast of Jane and Gregor. He was also returning to Ashmark with his father. Adam was the heir to Ashmark. He was an excellent rider and archer, highly skilled in martial arts, and Gregor knew that in future wars, Adam's military talent would also be remarkable. Adam had grown up in Casterly Rock since he was a child, serving as a page to Lord Tywin, and was Jaime Lannister's childhood playmate and closest friend and cousin. He was tall and thin, with shoulder-length copper-red hair. Others were afraid of the mountain, but in the west, there were at least 2 people who were not afraid of the mountain at all, Jaime Lannister and Adam Marbrand. These 2 had never been afraid of the mountain. Adam rode forward and shouted, "Lord Mountain, congratulations on your marriage. Are you going north with your father-in-law to visit your mother-in-law?" Because the mountain's mother-in-law was the daughter of a merchant, Tywin disliked her, and the other great nobles also looked down on her. To avoid embarrassing the atmosphere at the wedding feast, she was not invited to Casterly Rock to attend her daughter Jane's wedding. Gregor said, "Adam, thank you and your father, Lord Marbrand, for coming to my wedding feast. Now that Jane Westerling and I have become husband and wife, I am also a member of the Westerling family. I heard that someone is trying to interfere with my father-in-law's ancestral lands, offering more than double the price to buy them all. I'm sorry, but today they all have to be returned. I'm not used to waiting for others to return things on their own, I prefer to take the initiative to get them back. Adam laughed. Mountain, your father-in-law's ancestral lands were either sold to us or mortgaged to us. Whether they were sold or mortgaged, there were written agreements and protocols. Besides, you want to buy them back at the original price, but you don't allow others to offer a higher price. You think you can take them back just with your word? Yes, but it's not just with my word, but also with my great sword. It was unfair that you took my family's land and people at such a low price back then, and now I want to take them back at the same low price. He suddenly raised his voice and shouted, "Who dares to say no?" The mountain suddenly roared, like a thunderclap from the ground. Adam's horse was startled and suddenly retreated, crashing into the horse of the guard behind him. Several horses were startled together, and the horses reared up, throwing Adam to the ground. Adam was furious. As he jumped up from the ground, a wave of hot blood splashed over his head and face. The mountain's great sword swept diagonally, splitting Adam's warhorse in half. Lord Marbrand was shocked and rushed to protect his son. Adam was the heir to Ashmark, and he could not afford to lose him. Lord Marbrand, you have occupied my father-in-law's good land and mountains for many years, and now you are secretly offering double the price to buy the land that other lords were going to return. Today, I will ask you one question, are you returning my family's land or not? The mountain shouted sternly. Clang, clang, clang. The four knights around Marbrand drew their swords to protect their lord. Lord Marbrand sneered, "Mountain, I didn't occupy it by force back then, I paid for it. I also paid for the land of the other lords. If you dare to use force again, I will immediately return to Casterly Rock and report to Lord Tywin." Lord Tywin's mother was Lord Marbrand's paternal aunt, which was Lord Marbrand's reliance. The mountain grinned, "Lord Marbrand, I must take back what belongs to my family at the original price. Don't think you can scare me with the Duke." Adam flipped over and mounted another warhorse. He was young and vigorous, and his blood was boiling. He shouted, "The mountain insults me. Knights of the Marbrand family, what are you waiting for? Kill this vicious dog." The four family knights heard the young lord's order and immediately shouted, "4 horses and 4 swords," rushing towards the mountain. The mountain asked Gawain, his father-in-law whose face had changed slightly, "Father-in-law, are these 4 guys named Marbrand?" Lord Gawain shook his head. "Oh, sorry, they are just 4 little puppies raised by the Marbrand family. Although everyone is a dog, in fact, dogs are also divided into levels. The Marbrand surname does have weight, but..." The mountain spurred his horse to charge, and his great sword swept horizontally, cutting through the air like a blade through straw. The leading knight was cut in 2 at the waist, his upper body flying out, and his lower body still firmly seated on the horse. Amidst the exclamations on the opposite side, the mountain reined in his horse, flicked his right wrist nimbly, performed a beautiful sword flourish, and suddenly slashed down, splitting the second knight and his horse in 2, blood splashing like rain, dazzling and beautiful. "Good!" The 80-odd livestock behind him erupted in a thunderous cheer. Chapter 102. Those who haven't formally crossed swords with the mountain all misjudge the length of his great sword. The length of the mountain's great sword, combined with his arm length, is more than twice that of a 2-handed sword. A one-handed sword is about 1 meter long, used with one hand. It's also called a fighting sword. The most commonly used fighting sword is about 70 centimeters long. If a one-handed sword exceeds 1 meter, drawing it during combat will definitely be slower. After all, the longer the sword, the more time it takes to draw it, and it's not agile in close combat. Two-handed swords are about 1 meter 30 to 1 meter 50 long, twice the width of a one-handed sword, and more than twice the weight. Two-handed swords are also called long swords. Great swords, on the other hand, are twice the width of a two-handed sword, about 1.5 palms wide, and weigh more than twice as much as a two-handed sword, at 1.5 meters. Because of their length and weight, great swords are generally carried on the back, with the hilt protruding from the side of the shoulder, rather than hanging from a waist belt. The weight of a great sword is astonishing, requiring both hands to have enough strength to swing it, making it more suitable for ground combat rather than horseback riding. The sword that can be used conveniently on horseback is a one-handed sword, and only those with very good swordsmanship skills will use a two-handed sword. And the mountain's great sword is even heavier than ordinary great swords, more than twice the weight, with a width exceeding 2 adult palms, about 10 times the weight of a one-handed sword, and the longest among two-handed swords and great swords, unique in its kind. Combined with the length of his arm and the fact that he wields it with one hand, the attack range is at least 3 times the distance of a one-handed sword, and about twice the distance of other two-handed swords. In a duel with knights using one-handed or two-handed swords, there is a control of attack distance. Regardless of whether the knights are using one-handed swords suitable for mounted combat or two-handed swords used by skilled warriors, as long as they engage the mountain, they are not yet within attacking range when they approach him, but they have already entered the mountain's great sword's attack range. This has a surprising effect. Knights all have their own habits, long-term foot combat training or mounted combat training, and the swords they practice with against opponents are all familiar sword distances, but no knight has ever used a super great sword like the mountain's for combat training. This will lead to misjudgment of distance in actual combat. The knight thinks he has not yet reached the attacking distance, but the mountain's great sword has already come whistling, not only fast but also too powerful, indestructible. The most brutal thing in a knight's duel is to chop off the opponent's head with one sword. However, when encountering a killing god like the mountain, one sword, a horizontal slash, cuts off half the body. A vertical split not only cleaves the person open, but also the horse. This kind of divine power, bloodiness, cruelty, and unparalleled strength, arrogant knights treat as a joke and talk about as rumors without experiencing it firsthand. After all, the West has been at peace for 16 years. Although small conflicts between nobles are constant, the mountain's evil deeds are generally directed at the citizens and knights of other dukes when patrolling the border. Very few Westerland knights have actually fought the mountain. Even fewer Westerland knights have truly experienced the mountain's combat power. Moreover, the mountain achieved his notoriety 16 years ago when the Westerland army captured King's Landing, where he raped Princess Elia Martell and smashed her infant son to death. Time can dilute the cruel memories in people's minds. Adam Marbrand, the young hero who never took the mountain seriously, smiled proudly regardless of how terrible and terrifying the mountain was rumored to be. Firstly, Adam had been by Duke Tywin's side since he was a child, and this sense of superiority gave him blind confidence. Secondly, no matter how brutal the mountain was, he had never had any conflicts with Adam Marbrand in his life, and there was no intersection. Thirdly, the Marbrand surname and the Lannister surname are not ordinary relations. Duke Tywin's mother's surname was Marbrand. Fearlessness sometimes often represents one's own ignorance. In just the blink of an eye, the mountain's great sword chopped 2 knights of the Marbrand family into mutilated corpses, the tragedy and bloodiness of which was unheard of. He not only struck first and chopped down Adam's mount, but also cleaved a valiant knight and his horse in 2 with one sword during the battle. Blood rain and the smell of blood floated intensely in the air, making stomachs churn. The following 2 knights were shocked, and with a slight hesitation, the mountain kicked his spurs. The sharp blades of the spurs pierced into the warhorse's body, dripping with blood, making the warhorse under his crotch unbearable with pain. The warhorse immediately charged forward, and the mountain swung his great sword diagonally, cutting down from a knight's desperate eyes. The knight had already dodged, but the great sword's super length, combined with the mountain's speed and tree trunk-like arms, meant that the mountain's attack range was too wide, and the mountain used the super great sword with one hand. His flexibility and agility were not inferior to the smaller knights. With a flash of cold light, the great sword cut in from the knight's left neck, diagonally cleaving open his body, and cutting out from the knight's right waist. A triangular body with a head with a desperate and horrified expression flew out, while another triangular body spurting blood was still sitting firmly on the horse's back due to the saddle and stirrups. The large and small intestines in his abdomen spilled all over the ground. All the sergeants and knights, as well as the attendants, were terrified, their faces pale, blue, and purple, and they had no fighting spirit at all. Even the war horses were so frightened that their legs went weak, and several war horses stumbled, throwing their masters to the ground. Adam Marbrand was also shocked and trembled all over. The mountain's ferocity and evil aura were the first he had ever seen. Of the 4 knights, the last one was left. The sword in his hand was already raised, making a defensive posture, but cold sweat poured out from his forehead, nose, and neck. There was not a trace of blood on his face. The raised sword was also trembling violently. The mountain waved his hand back, and the back of the great sword slapped out horizontally, like a heavy hammer hitting the knight's chest. With a muffled thud, the knight's chest suddenly caved in, and the sound of bones cracking made teeth sour. The knight flew out suddenly, like a toy that had been knocked away by the mountain. While he was in the air, the blood in his mouth spurted out wildly, and the broken rib stabbed into his heart. Boom! The knight fell into the rice field by the side of the official road and died instantly. The mountain's great sword dripped with blood, and he slowly walked to Adam, glaring at Adam, as majestic as a heavenly god. "Mountain, what do you want to do?" Earl Marbrand shouted with insufficient confidence. The mountain glared at the Earl's chest blocked, and he couldn't catch his breath, and his face suddenly turned blue and purple. The mountain glanced around at this group of northern nobles. "Listen carefully, now I am cancelling the condition of buying back my land at the original price. You have made a lot of money over the years, and it is time to unconditionally return all my land and the people on the land. I will give you 1 month to return everything. After 1 month, whoever does not return it, no matter who it is, I will personally come to visit," the mountain said coldly. More than a dozen northern nobles did not say a word, and the shock and fear in their eyes could not be concealed. "Earl Marbrand, Casterly Rock is there, and Duke Tywin is also there. You are welcome to go to Duke Tywin to punish me at any time. To tell you the truth, Duke Tywin is not satisfied with your consistent extortion, bullying, and greedy money grabbing. Brothers, let's go." Ho! Only 86 cavalrymen, but they roared out the momentum of thousands of troops. Clip-clop! Clip-clop! The sound of horses' hooves was as dense as rain, and the mountain and Earl Gavin led the Clegane cavalry away from Earl Marbrand and others. Chapter 103. Casterly Rock. Lord Tywin Lannister held a smooth wooden cylinder in his hands, polished inside and out. It was originally an iron cylinder, but in response to the Duke's decree of wood instead of iron, the craftsman had changed it to wood. In the middle of the cylinder was a thin, smooth iron plate with many small holes drilled into it. The bottom of the wooden cylinder had a raised ring, and the circular iron plate fit perfectly into it. A solid wooden disc, the same size as the iron plate, had a long handle. Holding the handle, the solid wooden disc fit snugly into the wooden cylinder. The wooden cylinder was about 40 centimeters long, open at both ends, and without a lid. Lord Tywin and Maester Pycelle looked at the device. It was simple, consisting of 3 parts, a wooden cylinder, a perforated iron plate that could be freely inserted and removed, and a handled wooden plug that matched the cylinder's inner dimensions. Cylinder, thin iron plate, handled wooden plug. It was a very simple device, but its combination was a first for both Lord Tywin and Maester Pycelle. The craftsman who made it was beside them. Tob Mott, from Clegane village, a well-known weapons and machinery master from King's Landing. Beside the master stood the restrained Alicent, a woman from Clegane village, as well as little Alice, who had married Sir Polliver, and her grandfather, Butts, from King's Landing. Of course, Tywin's youngest daughter, Jane Westerling, was also there, standing beside her father. They were all in the Duke's kitchen. The Duke's cooks, servants, and attendants were also watching the cylinder. Beside them was a wooden basin. Because of the wood instead of iron decree, the iron basins in the Duke's household had also been replaced with wooden ones. And in the basin was dough that had already been kneaded. Under the guidance of Alicent, the noodle-making expert from Clegane village, eggs, herbal spices, snow salt, and a specially prepared spice packet from Clegane village had been added to the dough for the first time. Under everyone's quiet, attentive gaze, Master Tob placed the freshly cleaned iron plate into the equally freshly cleaned wooden cylinder. He stood the cylinder upright, and Alicent placed 2 fist-sized balls of dough into the cylinder from the top opening. Tob picked up the handled wooden plug, which was circular and perfectly matched the cylinder's inner diameter. After placing the wooden plug into the cylinder, Master Tob gripped the handle and pushed down forcefully. From the bottom opening of the cylinder, uniform strands of dough emerged from the small holes in the iron plate. A refined food from a distant Eastern civilization several levels higher. Hand-pulled noodles were being produced. Everyone watching held their breath. Master Tob pushed the wooden plug forcefully to the bottom, and strands of noodles continued to emerge from the small holes. Alicent used a long bamboo chopstick to lift the noodles from the center, preventing them from touching the ground due to their length. Another 2 balls of dough were placed into the cylinder from the top opening, and Master Tob repeated the same action. The noodles grew longer and longer, and Alicent raised the long bamboo chopstick holding the noodles. "Your Grace, the noodles produced in this way can be infinitely long. When they reach a certain length, they can be cut with scissors and hung on the long bamboo chopstick to dry in the sun. These are dry noodles, which can be stored for a long time and will not spoil as long as they are kept dry. The hanging in hand-pulled noodles comes from the fact that the noodles are hung on long bamboo chopsticks. Your Grace, the wet noodles can also be directly dropped into the pot and cooked, Tob said respectfully. Tywin's iron-like, cold face visibly softened, which was very rare. Maester Pycelle was secretly delighted by the Duke's rare gentleness. Is this how hand-pulled noodles are produced in Clegane village? The Duke asked. Your Grace, not exactly. The hand-pulled noodles in Clegane are produced by a purely mechanical, manually operated rocker, which is 10 times faster and more productive than this cylinder method. The noodle-making machinery is all made of iron. This manual, family-style cylinder method was ordered by Sir Gregor, specifically designed for Your Grace. Family-specific, Tywin said. His tone was also gentle, which was also rare. His imposing demeanor had a hint of approachability. Yes, it is for Your Grace's family specifically. Does this noodle taste good? After being dried, they can be eaten raw, crispy, fragrant, and hard, with a wonderful aftertaste on the tip of the tongue and in the mouth, Alicent said. Good, Lord Tywin said. Maester Pycelle, instruct the steward to give Tob and, what is your name? My name is Alicent, Your Grace. Alicent quickly stood up straight, lowered her head, and curtsied. Maester Pycelle, arrange for the steward to give Tob and Alicent 2 gold dragons each as a reward. Tob and Alicent thanked him repeatedly. The Duke's cooks and servants came forward. The cook learned to put the dough into the cylinder and push the wooden plug. Sure enough, noodles emerged from the bottom of the cylinder. Under Alicent's guidance, the servant used a second long bamboo chopstick to lift the noodles that were about to touch the ground. She raised the bamboo chopstick, and the noodles hung on the bamboo chopstick. Hand-pulled noodles. The structure of this device was very simple, and the production method was also very simple, but the wisdom and ingenuity it contained impressed Maester Pycelle greatly. It was a very simple device, but very practical. Where is your Sir Gregor? Lord Tywin asked about the mountain. Father, Sir Gregor is discussing the repurchase of our family's land with the northern nobles. He will be back soon, Jane said softly. Tywin looked at Jane. In the past, when Lord Tywin looked at people, he would stare, his gaze like nails, but this time he used look, his eyes without sharpness. He won't be too late to come back for lunch, will he? No, father, Jane said politely and elegantly. The Duke nodded, his eyes gentle. The small machinery and production process of family hand-pulled noodles put him in a good mood. Let's go to the study. Lord Tywin glanced at Master Butts. Yes. Jane, Butts, Alice, Tob, and Maester Pycelle said in unison, respectfully. The woman Alicent stayed in the kitchen as a hand-pulled noodle master to teach the cooks how to cook hand-pulled noodles. The study was where Lord Tywin cultivated his mind and discussed top-secret matters. The group walked into the study, and Maester Pycelle gently closed the door. Outside the door were 7 steps, and the guards stood away from the steps. There were no books in Lord Tywin's study. The only decoration on the wall was a very exquisite silk painting, depicting a stunningly beautiful woman with watery eyes looking at everyone with a faint smile on her face. Her name was Joanna Lannister, Tywin Lannister's cousin and his wife, who had passed away 25 years ago. Lord Tywin sat upright behind his desk, his back straight. The rare gentleness in the kitchen had disappeared without a trace, and cruel, ruthless indifference had returned to his face, conveyed through his eyes. Master Butts, take it out. The Duke said. Chapter 104. Yes, Your Grace. Master Buzz was visibly nervous. He fumbled in his pockets 3 times, and with the help of his granddaughter, Esther, finally pulled out 3 gold dragons. His fingers trembled slightly as he gently placed them before Duke Tywin. Duke Tywin's gaze made both Buzz and Esther tense up. The room was silent, save for the sound of uncontrollable swallowing and heavy breathing. These were unofficial counterfeit coins. This was the first time such a thing had appeared in the Westerlands. It was Gregor Clegane who had created them. 3 gold dragons of different years and images. The first gold dragon was very new, with the head of King Robert Baratheon on the front. Duke Tywin glanced at the Maester, and Maester Potter immediately produced an identical gold dragon to place beside the counterfeit. No matter how you looked at it, the king on the counterfeit coin and the brightness of the gold dragon itself were slightly more pleasing to the eye than the genuine gold dragon, and the quality was also better. Turning the 2 gold dragons over, the backs featured the same 3-headed dragon. From the perspective of the engraving's relief and visual aesthetics, the counterfeit surpassed the real coin. In terms of color, the counterfeit's brightness was also higher, with a very faint reddish-bright color in the golden yellow, which added to the texture. Duke Tywin was very knowledgeable about coins, but he couldn't figure out how the very faint reddish-bright color in the counterfeit, which was even more real than the real coin, was made. Did Master Buzz make the model? Duke Tywin was surprised by the craftsman's skill. Yes, Master Tob also helped and participated, Master Buzz said. He felt as if an invisible iron plate was pressing on his chest. This was also the reason why Master Tob was here, he had also participated in the production of the counterfeit coins. Buzz's granddaughter had also participated, so she was also here. Jane Westerling was their master, so Jane Westerling was also here. Arya, who cooked noodles, was unaware of this secret and was left in the kitchen. Privately minting coins was a capital offense for a commoner. For nobles, it meant confiscation of property and deprivation of knighthood. But the kind old man Buzz was forced to do it. Forced by the Mountain. His little granddaughter had also been forced to marry the neurotic Polliver. Privately minting gold dragons was a major crime, but after the Master Mountain had made the model and tried to produce the first counterfeit coin, he sent them to Duke Tywin to report on their work. Master Buzz's mind went blank the moment he received the order. This should have been a secret crime, but the Mountain was not afraid of death and actually asked Master Buzz, his granddaughter Esther, and Master Tob to report to His Grace the Duke. Although the old man was half scared to death, he still had the strength and courage to stand firm because of his mistress Jane being here. The old man was sure that he completely didn't understand the tricks played by the high-ranking nobles. But they were the knife and he was the fish. The old man could only take a deep breath, adjusting his fiery heart and churning emotions. Looking at the fake gold dragon that was even more real than the real coin, Duke Tywin's piercing gaze gradually softened. "How is this bright silver color made?" Tywin asked. His eyes swept over everyone present. "A little copper is added," the old man said. He glanced timidly at Jane Westerling and swallowed the second half of his sentence. The technique of adding copper was completed under the guidance of Lord Mountain. Adding a certain proportion of copper instead of gold, firstly, reduced the actual cost, secondly, it was more beautiful, better looking, and more textured than genuine coins made with general techniques, even more genuine than genuine coins. If circulated on the market, people would be more willing to use this kind of gold dragon. No one could tell with the naked eye that the counterfeit gold dragon contained copper, and the technology of this era couldn't detect it either. This was a black technology secret. Lord Mountain's idea, I presume, Tywin asked. He looked at his foster daughter Jane beside him. Yes, father. Not only was it Lord Mountain's idea, but the technique of adding copper was also guided by the Mountain. Tywin was expressionless. In the eyes of the simple old man Buzz, Tywin was a serious and upright in appearance, but actually a terrible old thief with a sinister heart. In contrast, the old man felt that the Duke was more terrifying, more frightening, and more chilling to him than the Mountain. Tywin picked up the second gold dragon. This was a gold dragon that was completely indistinguishable from what he remembered. The front of the gold dragon was printed with the head of his former friend, the Mad King Aerys Targaryen. Aerys was the last king of the Targaryen dynasty. 16 years ago, Duke Tywin personally sent his dynasty and royal family to the Dark Hell. Maester Potter took out a gold dragon from the same era, and the two gold dragons were placed together. Duke Tywin, whose familiarity with gold was unmatched, couldn't tell which one was real and which one was fake. In fact, both gold dragons were real, but one came from the king's mint and the other from the Mountain's private mint. Both were genuine gold and silver. Both used the same minting techniques. Only the minters were different. There's no copper added to this. Added, Your Grace. Master Buzz's anxiety gradually calmed down. Oh. Duke Tywin picked up the two gold dragons again to look at them. So even if copper was added, the gold dragon wouldn't show the slightly bright red texture. The master was indeed a mint master who had worked in the mint outside King's Landing for his entire life. The era engraved on the third gold dragon was even older, an old gold coin from the era of the cruel Magurai, more than 200 years ago. The gold coin had aged, worn, lost its luster, and partially turned black. This was a technique that required antiquing. Duke Tywin knew that this counterfeit coin had only just been minted. Although he didn't show it, this antiquing technique surprised him again. But the antiquing technique was also taught to Old Buzz by the Mountain. Old Buzz didn't tell Tywin this. Daily use or environmental factors can cause gold to lose its bright color. This is because it is impossible for gold to be completely free of impurities, and this backward semi-pastoral, semi-agricultural era cannot refine 100% pure gold. When a large amount of fine dust in the dry air falls on the gold dragon, and when the sweat and other substances discharged from the human body come into contact with the silver or copper contained in the gold itself, a chemical reaction will occur, producing silver chloride and copper sulfide, which appear dark black. Only 100% pure gold will become brighter with use. The minting and gold refining techniques of the Targaryen royal family 200 years ago were worse than they are now. If these 3 gold dragons of different eras and appearances were taken out for use, no one would think that they were counterfeit coins produced by Clegane's village. Tywin was very sure of this. Maester, reward Master Buzz with 2 gold dragons, Duke Tywin said. Yes, Your Grace. The heart that Master Buzz had been holding finally landed. Now that the gold dragon model had been made and he could mint them himself, the Duke could completely kill him to silence him. Duke Tywin kept the 3 counterfeit coins and waved for Old Man Buzz, Esther, and Master Tobb to leave. Duke Tywin stared at Jane as if a tiger was looking at a little sheep grazing, completely unaware of the danger. Jane, you shouldn't have known about this. Jane sighed quietly, Father, I've already married Clegane. The room was quiet for a while. I don't know anything about the mountain minting gold dragons, understand? And Gavin can't know either. Yes, Father. Tell Gregor to hand over the noodle business to Earl Uthel to take care of. He just needs to share the money. Mint gold dragons, focusing on new coins. Yes, Father. Chapter 105. Jane, you may leave us. I need to speak with the Maester. Yes, Father. The mountain has returned. Have him come to me. As you command, Father. Jane curtsied and withdrew. The study door closed softly once more. My Lord Duke, I fear the mountain may lose control and harm the nobles of the north, Maester Potter said. Lord Tywin said blandly, I would be more concerned if he didn't. Oh? Why do you say that, my Lord Duke? The Duke did not answer. Slowly, Lord Tywin removed military whistle diagrams, snow salt production diagrams, chopsticks wrapped in red brocade, coinage diagrams, noodle machine diagrams, and the S-bent diagram from the drawer. The Maester looked astonished. My Lord Duke, did Sir Gregor give you the coinage diagrams and noodle machine diagrams before this? And the S-bent diagram too? I had these long before Lord Ode reported the noodle machine and the S-bend to me. The Maester was speechless for a long moment. Lord Ode's advice was meaningless to the Duke. The Duke was already fully aware of Gregor Clegane's every move, including his ingenious inventions. Gregor handed them to me personally, the Duke said, watching the Maester's astonished expression. He admitted that he designed all of these. The Maester murmured. He realized that he understood less than 1% of what the Duke knew about Sir Gregor. Lord Tywin seemed not to hear the Maester's question, directly ignoring what he did not want to answer. Maester, the gold mines of the Westerlands won't last much longer. What will become of the Westerlands when the gold mines are depleted? The Duke picked up the snow salt production flowchart. Snow salt can become the second gold mine of the Westerlands, but it is not enough. The Maester nodded. The wood for iron of chopsticks can effectively reduce weapon prices in 3 months and reduce the consumption of iron ore from the Iron Islands, but our purchase of iron ore can only increase, not decrease. Yes, we need to secretly stockpile large amounts of iron ore. The coordination of military whistles, war drums, and horns can enhance the combat power of our Westerlands legions and surpass our opponents in military warfare, Tywin said. The Maester was an amateur when it came to military affairs, but he knew that the Duke was an outstanding military strategist who had become famous in the Seven Kingdoms at the age of 17 during the War of the Nine Penny Kings, and at the age of 18, he had destroyed the 2 most powerful nobles in the Westerlands, exterminating them completely, leaving no one alive. Yes, my Lord Duke. Noodles can be sold throughout the Seven Kingdoms and even overseas, but this high-end noodle dish is only for the nobles. Just give this bit of profit to Gregor and Lord Ode. Casterly Rock only needs to collect a certain amount of taxes. A wise decision, my lord. The S-bend only keeps the odor out of our toilets, and once it spreads, everyone can imitate it. The money from selling it is actually limited and can be completely ignored. Yes, my Lord Duke. Coinage, however, is the best way to increase the wealth of the Westerlands. Lord Tywin finally picked up the coinage diagram that the mountain had given him. When our gold mines are exhausted, the coins we mint ourselves will be a secretly hidden gold mine. Tywin looked at the coinage diagram with admiration in his eyes. Yes. The maester answered cautiously. The mountain was secretly minting coins, but the Duke seemed to approve of it. Could it be that the mountain was not minting coins for himself alone but also for the Duke? This thought made the maester break out in a cold sweat. The Duke was privately minting coins. This crime could be great or small. The great could rise to treason, and the king would strip the Duke of his title, territory, and power. The small could be dissolved into nothingness. The king was the Duke's son-in-law, the queen was his daughter, and the princes and princesses were his grandchildren. Behind closed doors, they were all one family. But the Duke had clearly told Jane that he was unaware of the mountain's coin minting. If the coin minting conspiracy were exposed, wouldn't the only one to be questioned be the mountain? The answer was obvious. The maester broke out in another cold sweat. He had served the Duke for decades and always had an indelible sense of awe for the Duke. Respect was respect, and awe was fear. But these are all trivial matters. A look of loneliness appeared on the Duke's face. The Lannister family has been passed down for thousands of years. When the gold mines are exhausted, the Lannisters must find other ways to survive. Otherwise, how can they continue to be passed down for thousands of years? The Lannister name is 1,000 times more important than my Tywin's life. The Duke's eyes suddenly fixed on the Maester's face. Maester Potter, do you have any good ideas? Maester Potter's heart was blank. He had no good ideas at all. If the Duke hadn't said that the gold mines wouldn't last many more years, he wouldn't have realized this problem at all. Every month, a steady stream of gold mine carriages drove along the Golden Road into the King's Mint, showing off the wealth and grandeur of the richest family in the world. Who would have thought that this was the last glory of the Westerlands? It was like the brilliance before sunset. My lord, I have no idea about the future of the Westerlands, Potter said frankly, full of trepidation. Lying to the Duke was like courting death. The Duke's eyes were sharp, and no one could match his ability to see people and things. Suddenly, the maester understood why Sir Gregor had told the Duke all his secrets. He also suddenly understood why the Mountain, the most heinous villain in the Seven Kingdoms, could comfortably commit evil deeds by the side of such an astute and ruthless Duke. Everything about Gregor was, in fact, no secret to the Duke. From the time Gregor began following the Duke at the age of 12 until now, 20 years, he had never had any secrets from the Duke, any secrets at all. Everyone who thought Gregor had secrets and reported him to the Duke was coldly watched by the Duke. They secretly told the Duke bad things about Gregor behind his back, but each time, the Duke nodded to show that he knew. It turned out that the Duke himself knew even more, deeper and more thoroughly than these people said. To bring down Sir Gregor in front of the Duke, no slander was possible. Unless the Duke himself wanted to destroy the Mountain. Now that the Mountain had suddenly become intelligent and favored by the Seven Gods, his series of contributions had given the Duke a new dawn, causing the anxious Lord Tywin to think about the future path of the Westerlands. Maester Potter vaguely felt some clues, but he had no idea whether they were correct. He only understood one thing: in the future, don't say anything bad about Sir Gregor in front of the Duke, anything. There was a very deep and special connection between the Mountain and the Duke that outsiders could not understand at all. This special bond was different from the relationship between Tywin and anyone else. Having figured this out, the maester suddenly understood the Duke's earlier statement, I would be more concerned if he didn't hurt people. The Mountain's enlightened mind did not change his wickedness, and he was resented by the nobles. Perhaps that was exactly what the Duke wanted. Chapter 106. The Mountain and Count Gavin led the way, followed by his brigands. In the first row were the cavalry officers. Sweetmouth Raff Cregan, the knight who trained all the noble generals of the Westerlands in the art of military sentry control, had greatly increased his worth, prestige, and noble connections in just over a month. Executioner Duncan Cregan was highly skilled in martial arts, especially swordsmanship. No one in the entire legion was better at combat than him, except for the Mountain. Neurotic, fanatically loyal, and a lover of human organ art. Poliver Cregan, bald and tall, with a simple mind and a look of madness in his eyes. The Mountain's 4 sword strikes that killed the 4 knights of the Marbrand family had intimidated the northern nobles, preventing them from moving, and had made Poliver's blood boil. He really wanted to go up and collect some art pieces. Kyswick the Big Head, wearing a bull helmet, looked even bigger, giving the impression of being top-heavy, making one fear that he would fall off his horse because his head was too big and heavy. Although his neck was actually very thick and his shoulders were extremely broad, everything from the neck down seemed too slender in contrast to his huge bull helmet. Julie Cregan, the adopted daughter, stood out among the group of beasts, her body slender and graceful. Whether it was armor or weapons, Julie used things that were custom-made for her. Others were lucky to have a good father, but Julie had too. The Mountain, her father, had been so majestic and invincible with his great sword in front of so many great nobles, that Julie's admiration for her father was beyond words. This gave her the illusion that she could do whatever she wanted. The little girl had also subtly learned the bloody dominance and crushing cruelty from her father. The cavalrymen behind them had all had their hearts cleansed by the Mountain's slaughter. The ranks included death row inmates and desperate felons who had changed their names, as well as down-and-out wandering warriors, natives of the territory, strong miners, and young subjects. The Mountain's crushing slaughter had invisibly added a bloodthirst to their bodies, which made their hearts more cruel and ruthless, and also subtly made them more ferocious. A lion leading sheep will turn the sheep into lions. Sheep leading lions will turn the lions into sheep. The Mountain's magic was that he could make those who followed him more and more devoted day by day, and could turn them from sheep into lions. On the 10-mile official road, war horses galloped and the three-dog banner fluttered. People hurriedly avoided it on the side of the road when they saw it from a distance. As the war horses galloped past, everyone lowered their heads and looked at their toes. Whether they were knights or sergeants, they all avoided the roadside. The Mountain stood on horseback in the Lion's Mouth gate of Casterly Rock. Beside the Lion's Mouth, Foul Mouth, still slightly weak, waited there on horseback. Kyswick spurred his horse out of the ranks, saluted the Mountain along with Foul Mouth, and then galloped along the coastal road. According to the Mountain's prior orders, now that Chiswick's wedding was over, his task was to gather his old men in Lannisport and establish his own mercenary group, the Cregan Cutthroats. His dozen or so brothers from the death row prison in Lannisport had been released before the Mountain's wedding. Because they were death row inmates, and their reputation was very bad, each of them had unkind features and a sinister aura. Their status was also that of commoners, none of them were knights, and they had not yet been officially incorporated into the Mountain's team, so Tywin Lannister's wedding for the Mountain and Janei, Kyswick did not ask them to attend. Count Oddbur's hope that Kyswick would recruit 2 ships of pirates for him might have been dashed. Janei cleverly had Duke Tywin say a word of support for Cregan establishing a mercenary group in Lannisport to make money during breakfast. Because this sentence was said by the Duke, it had an unusual meaning. Even if a king and a beggar say the same sentence, the effect will definitely be worlds apart. Count Oddbur felt like he had fallen into a trap. Perhaps he should pay more attention to Lady Janei in the future, because Lady Janei had a grandmother with a great reputation in Lannisport, a witch who could see fragments of the future through blood. Count Oddbur judged that Cregan's idea of setting up a mercenary group in Lannisport was very sudden, and that this plan must have come from Janei. Count Oddbur suspected whether Janei was launching a retaliation because he had secretly advised the Duke. In the Duke's study. As soon as the Mountain entered, Maester Potter felt that the space in the study had become smaller. The Duke sat behind his desk, staring at the Mountain. Any dead? Killed 4. The Duke's face was expressionless, but there was a very stern warning in his eyes. However, Maester Potter knew that the Duke's thoughts were the opposite. He was probably praising the Mountain for doing a good job. As long as the Mountain did evil and made enemies, no matter how great his achievements, how unparalleled he was, how intelligent he was, or how many things he invented, it would not cause the Duke to have the slightest bit of fear of him. If the Mountain stopped doing evil, was kind to others, and gained people's support, his death would inevitably be near. Who? 4 little rabbits. The Duke stared at the Mountain, pursing his lips. The Mountain began to feel uneasy, and finally said awkwardly in front of the Duke, "Father, I was wrong." The Duke's face slowly softened. "I must remind you again that privately minting coins violates national law." "I know." The Mountain shrugged indifferently. The Duke was silent again, and no one knew what he was thinking. Finally, he glanced at the Maester. "I am not aware that you are privately minting coins." "Understood. You need troops to maintain it, and that place is absolutely not allowed to be entered by anyone." "I will have troops. How much money do you need me to give you?" The Mountain knew that Lord Tywin was not a generous person. "Give me 200 gold dragons as a reward for my invention. I will be prepared to go to the north. In order to establish the prestige of that place and ensure that no one dares to break in, I may fight a few tough battles, but I guarantee that I will not kill any nobles, just their cats, dogs, and rabbits. Good. Father, I heard that the Iron Islands have raised the price of iron ore again. Yes, this is a very tricky problem. On Great Wick in the Iron Islands, there is iron ore everywhere. Let's just go and take it. The Iron Islands are not far from our Westerlands. We cannot defeat Balong Greyjoy at sea. Then we won't fight at sea. Give me an army, I will go at night, land on the island and fight, I will destroy the Ironborn. There was another silence. Duke Tywin said, now is a time of peace. 10 years ago, Balon rebelled. We conquered Balon and took the Iron Islands. I once advised the king to eradicate the Greyjoy family, but the king refused. Yes, a time of peace, the Mountain repeated dismissively. The Mountain knew very well that since the Duke's daughter Cersei and his younger brother Jaime had committed incest, had 3 children, and they had grown up, the king had been wearing 3 tall green hats, and Prime Minister Jon had intervened in the investigation and been poisoned, the days of peace in the 7 kingdoms had actually come to an end. Even without Littlefinger, the seeds that Jaime had sown in Cersei's belly were seeds of turmoil. These seeds had taken root and sprouted over the past 10 years and had grown into a big tree. When the first person knows about a scandal, there will be a second and a third. Paper cannot contain fire, it's just a matter of time. Father, besides praying to the 7 gods, maybe we can also ask the witch, the Mountain suggested. This was an absolutely superstitious era, an era of absolute faith in the gods, and the prophecies of witches had a very powerful influence. Chapter 107. Lord Tywin was looking at the Mountain. Maester Potter felt for the first time that there was an inexplicable, strange understanding between the Duke and the Mountain. He had just felt it, and had never felt it before. Did you hear any prophecies from the witch? The Duke asked the Mountain. Yes. What prophecy? The Duke stared at the Mountain, his eyes able to see through everything. Father, why don't you ask the witch yourself? The witch's prophecy requires your blood. The prophecy about me isn't very good. What prophecy? The Duke asked again. In 2 years, in the Great Hall of Maegor's Holdfast in King's Landing, I will be stabbed by Oberyn Martell, the Red Viper of Dorne, with poison on the tip of his spear. Both the Duke and the Maester slightly adjusted their postures. 16 years ago, Oberyn Martell's sister, Elia Martell, was raped and killed by the Mountain in the royal nursery, and the person who ordered it was Duke Tywin. The Mountain then also threw the Queen's baby boy to his death. The Duke said in a deep voice, nonsense. The Mountain said, well, I'm also skeptical. Absolutely not credible, Duke Tywin said decisively. Knock, knock, knock. A guard knocked on the door. The Duke nodded, and the Maester went over to open the door. A servant entered, a boy with all the characteristics of the Lannister family, named William Lannister, the second son of Kevin Lannister, who was 13 years old this year. The little boy was obviously a little afraid of the Mountain, and he leaned towards the Maester. Your Grace, the envoys from the Iron Islands would like to ask if you need the iron ore to be unloaded. If we don't need the iron ore, they will set sail and leave. How much more are they going to raise the price this time before they are willing to unload the goods? The Mountain asked in a deep voice. William was startled and stammered, they have raised the price by 5 gold dragons this time. There are 5 ships of iron ore in total this time. The Iron Islands have raised the price from 7 gold dragons per ship of iron ore to 28 gold dragons per ship. Now these 5 ships of ore are asking for 5 more gold dragons out of thin air. This is too much. Father, the Ironborn should be completely eradicated, the Mountain said angrily. Duke Tywin's face became cold and hard. Are they determined to raise the price this time? Yes. The boy was a little timid. Your Grace, they said that this is already the lowest price. They originally wanted to raise the price by 2 gold dragons per ship, but this time they only raised it by 1 gold dragon. Okay, you can go. I know, the Duke said coldly. Yes, Your Grace. William bowed slightly, turned and walked out, gently closing the door. The child paid great attention to the details of propriety. The Mountain was furious and said, Father, I want to meet the bastards from the Iron Islands. He was aggressive. What do you want to do? I want to talk to them. We will never accept their price increase again. Duke Tywin looked at the Mountain with a blank expression, leaning back slightly. Sir Gregor, go and take care of your business first. I will handle this matter. The Mountain snorted, Father, the Ironborn are lowlifes and must be eradicated. Let the Iron Islands become an affiliated island of the West. I am willing to take the lead. The Duke stared at the mountain. You go first. Don't go and make trouble for the Ironborn. I will handle it. I will notify you in advance when I need you. The mountain did not answer, glanced at the Duke, and strode out. He opened the door and left, without closing the door. Maester Potter hurried over to close the door to the study. Maester. The Duke said. Yes, Your Grace. If we are going to war with the Iron Islands, what would be a good reason? Maester Potter had some knowledge in this area. Your Grace, whether it was during the Targaryen dynasty or during the reign of King Robert, the Iron Islands would rebel and become independent once they had a little strength. They have never had a bit of loyalty. Throughout history, rebellion and independence have always been the tradition of the Ironborn. Well, rebellion is a good excuse, Duke Tywin said slowly. If we raise troops to eradicate the Ironborn, we will no longer have to worry about iron ore. But we still have a problem. Once we no longer have gold mines, many of our miners will have to return home, but there is not enough land at home for them to cultivate. Yes, the Maester said worriedly. We have more mountains and less fields, and we have to import a lot of food every year. We cannot be self-sufficient like the Riverlands and the Reach. Once thousands of miners are unemployed, and there is not enough land at home for them to cultivate, a large number of idle laborers will also become a serious social problem. Tywin clasped his hands together and propped up his chin. Maester, take out the map of the Seven Kingdoms and take a look. Yes, Your Grace. There is a port inside the west city of Casterly Rock. This port is a huge cave formed by years of seawater erosion of the rocks. The cave, which has been eroded for thousands of years, reaches the interior of the west city. More than a dozen docks are arranged around the cave. Although this is not as large as the nearly 100 docks in Lannisport, and even less comparable to the super-large scale of 100 and several dozen docks in King's Landing, it is rare as a dock that goes deep into the interior of the city. The 5 ships of iron ore from the Iron Islands were docked at one of the docks. The mountain came to the West City port and saw the 5 ships of iron ore. The 5 ships carrying iron ore were obviously smaller than in the past. If His Grace the Duke is forced to accept this price increase, then the iron ore sold by the Iron Islands to Lannisport, the iron ore sold to Fair Isle, and the iron ore sold to the Crag and Casey, etc., will undoubtedly all increase in price. This will be another major expense that the Westlands will have to increase. But this is not the key. The real key is that the greed of the Ironborn is endless. The mountain came with his brothers. Because he couldn't do anything about this. The Duke had told him that His Grace the Duke would handle this matter himself. Okay, the mountain will not interfere in the price negotiation, but if these Iron Islands guys dare to harass the women of the Westlands, it is a matter of course to have their legs broken. The Ironborn's favorite thing to do is to plunder. This is their tradition, which they call the Old Way. The Old Way is the concrete external expression of the Ironborn's traditional plundering culture. In this pirate culture, a person's value mainly depends on the level of his plundering skills, and depends on how much living resources he can grab. The Ironborn do not wear any jewelry unless they have paid the iron price. Paying the iron price has nothing to do with shopping with money. The Ironborn's iron price is his knife and fist. He kills or knocks you down, and this is called paying the iron price. Then, your accessories will belong to him, because he has paid the iron price and completed the purchase process. You can tell the level of his bravery by how many decorations and accessories the Ironborn wears. The Iron Islands have many iron mines, and the entire island of Great Wick is iron ore. In addition to iron mines, the Ironborn also have island farms. Those who work in the mines and farms of the Iron Islands are called slave laborers. All slave laborers are prisoners captured by the Ironborn during raids, and the Ironborn, as the true people of the Iron Islands, disdain to do this lowly work. They have a high opinion of themselves and are full of superiority. In addition to working as slave laborers, female prisoners also have to be responsible for warming the bed for the Ironborn at night. An Ironborn man can have countless unlimited salt wives, but can only have one rock wife. The rock wife must be a native Ironborn, because in the eyes of the Ironborn, people from other places are weak and lowly except for the people of the Iron Islands. Therefore, being presumptuous with the women of the Greenlands has always been a fine tradition of the Ironborn who feel good about themselves. The mountain entered the most famous restaurant in the port, went to the highest point, and sat down by the window. He looked down and saw two coquettishly dressed women walking on the dock, swaying their waists, while several of his brothers were leisurely strolling around the stalls of the dock vendors. In just a short while, whistles sounded from the iron ore ship, and several iron-born jumped ashore, rudely flirting with the two women, touching them and asking for prices. They mistook the two women dressed as good women for prostitutes. Well, these two women disguised as good women are indeed prostitutes. The world will be in chaos, and the ironborn must be eradicated, so let's start the first fire. Chapter 108. Ironborn, a people whose way of life and glory revolves around raiding and killing. They neither believe in the old gods of the first men, nor the new gods of the Andals. The seven, they worship the drowned god. The Ironborn's creed, what is dead may never die, but rises again, harder and stronger. They believe that those who worship the drowned god will never truly die. If a person dies, it is not the end, but a journey to the drowned god's watery halls to be served by mermaids. During the drowning ritual, the Ironborn are submerged in sea water until they suffocate, then revived using crude, primitive CPR techniques. When the drowned person awakens, it signifies rebirth, rises again, and becoming stronger than before, harder and stronger. Those who cannot be revived are considered sinners, their hearts not true to the drowned god. The great house ruling the Iron Islands is House Greyjoy, led by Balong Greyjoy. The Greyjoy family words are "we do not so." This is the source of their confidence in despising the Greenland's weaklings, because the Greenland's weaklings are feeble, delicate, lack courage, and only know how to toil, daring not to take by force. In the mountain's eyes, the Ironborn are a primitive, barbaric, ignorant people who genuinely enjoy killing. They have never revered life, only trampled upon it, just like the mountain used to. The mountain didn't bring many of his brothers this time, 3 brothers, Raff the Sweetling, the loyal Polliver, and the executioner Dunson. Plus, a few native cavalry brothers from his territory who haven't killed anyone yet, to give them more experience and help them quickly become fierce, savage, and ruthless. Since the Duke didn't seem inclined to teach these Ironborn a lesson, nor allow the mountain to do so, the mountain kept a low profile. Most of his brothers were unaware, otherwise, people would really die. He only brought 3 knights from House Clegane and a few native cavalry warriors from the villages. The rookies needed training. When the mountain came to the tavern, he saw several Ironborn drinking in a private room on the 2nd floor, at the corner. The Ironborn's attire was easy to recognize. First, their clothes were very dirty, either black or grey. Their faces were tanned dark brown from the constant sea winds. Second, their voices were also very distinctive, as if they had a small ball in their mouths, and their tongues seemed unable to straighten. Finally, they didn't wear armor. Those who fight at sea avoid wearing armor because anyone who falls into the water while wearing armor will sink straight to the bottom. But the Iron Islands have a fleet comparable to any in the 7 kingdoms. The renowned Iron Fleet. Which is different. Victarion Greyjoy is the 2nd younger brother of Lord Balong Greyjoy. He is the commander-in-chief of the Iron Fleet. He is a devout believer in the drowned god. Even when sailing, he wears heavy armor, believing that he is blessed by the drowned god and will never drown at sea. His soldiers, influenced by him, all wear heavy armor and wield large axes, making them incredibly brave and fierce. It is said that among the 7 kingdoms, there is no fleet that can match the Iron Fleet in naval warfare. However, the Ironborn selling iron ore this time are not from the Iron Fleet. This can be seen from their attire, flags, and the noble house emblems on their clothes. The flag pattern on the 5 iron ore ships is a black horn with gold trim centered on a red background. This is the house emblem of House Goodbrother of Great Wick, Hammerhorn. House Goodbrother is a very powerful house among the Ironborn nobles and one of the most influential nobles on the Iron Island's largest island, Great Wick. Hammerhorn is located deep within the island's stone mountains, far from the open sea. House Goodbrother's main source of wealth is the iron ore-rich mines. The Iron Islands sell iron ore to the Westerlands, the North, the Riverlands, the Reach, and Old Town. The nobles of the Westerlands are well aware that the Iron Islands always sell iron ore to the Westerlands at the highest price. The reason is simple: the Westerlands have gold mines. House Lannister is the wealthiest in the world, lacking nothing but lacking money. The annual increase in iron ore prices, or even the quarterly increase, has caused much resentment among the nobles of the Westerlands. However, the Westerlands have no iron ore and cannot be self-sufficient. Moreover, the Iron Islands can choose not to sell iron ore to the Westerlands, they have other places to sell it. Iron ore is never difficult to sell. But the Westerlands cannot do without iron ore. This is a blatant extortion. This is also the Ironborn's way of dealing with the world. As long as they can take advantage, they will continue to do so, and even escalate. The principle of knowing when to stop is impossible to exist in the Ironborn's minds. When the mountain came to the tavern owner was terrified. He hid his wife and daughter first, then came to the mountain's table with a smile. The mountain sat alone on the first floor. Because as soon as he arrived, the customers on this floor quietly left. These people were very polite, making sure not to make any noise when they left. "Sir Gregor, you get out," Gregor said politely with just this one word. Then, the tavern owner left. It was very quiet. So, the mountain looked down at the docks below. "Hey! Let her go!" A balding, somewhat neurotic man said timidly. This man was tall, but his eyes were timid, and he was obviously a commoner, wearing coarse clothes, with a crude short knife at his waist like a knight. This is the kind of craven man from the Greenlands that the Ironborn deeply despise. "Big brother, don't ask for a beating," a shorter but very stout Ironborn laughed. "Get lost quickly. She is my wife." The man mustered his courage and raised his voice a little, his eyes flickering, obviously afraid. "Let her go, this is Lanny sport." "Your wife?" another Ironborn said in disbelief. "Big brother, how could you have a wife when you are so ugly?" The three Ironborn laughed together. On the ship, more Ironborn emerged from the cabins to watch, each with a rugged black face and unfriendly eyes. Whoosh! The man who seemed a little abnormal drew the short knife from his waist. It must be said that the scabbard was not great, but the quality of this short knife was really good, gleaming with a cold light. A good knife. The neurotic man seemed stimulated, constantly tilting his head mechanically, looking at people with his eyes askew, the right half of his face twitching. "Let go of my wife, or I will kill you." The three Ironborn and more than 10 Ironborn on the ship laughed together. They had seen too many of these craven men who were scared to death inside but had mouths as hard as iron ore. As soon as they made a move and saw blood, this kid would be so scared that he would kneel and beg for mercy. The Ironborn were brave men who came and went in the wind, licking blood from their blades, enjoying killing and arson. When had they ever been afraid of a craven man who was shaking even while holding a knife? "Come on, brother, stab here. Don't shake your hand." A guy who was even taller and stronger than the bald neurotic man tore open his shirt, revealing his black iron-like chest covered with chest hair. As expected, the bald neurotic man took a step back in fright and stammered, "Let go of my wife, don't force me." The Ironborn laughed again at his craven appearance, scared to death but with a stubbornly hard mouth. More Ironborn walked from the iron ore ship's cabins to the deck to watch the excitement. "Come on, brother, don't be afraid, stab here." The neurotic bald man looked up and saw a face watching him from the window on the top floor of the tavern. The bald man said, "Are you really begging me to stab you?" "Of course, I'm just afraid." The short knife stabbed into the chest of this tall, stout Ironborn. The action was too fast, his two brothers were still laughing, the Ironborn on the ship were still joking, and the bald man had already pulled out the knife and stabbed a second time. Chapter 109. Widened eyes, horrified expressions, gaping mouths, trembling hands, gushing blood. The Ironborn who was stabbed was even taller and stronger than the bald, neurotic man. His face was as rugged as black rock, but now, his strength and honor were rapidly withering with the splatter of blood. His eyes were filled with terror. Even the faith that the dead do not die could not stop his fear of death. Two women screamed, broke free from the arms of the other two Ironborn, and fled as fast as they could, running with anything but ladylike grace. He kept demanding it. The bald, neurotic man said, trembling, himself frightened by the blood. His eyes were also full of horror. It was as if he had underestimated the amount of blood that would gush out when a knife was stabbed into a body, and he was shocked. Also shocked were the dock workers, sailors, captains, Ironborn, and small vendors along the dockside street. When this blood-soaked Ironborn fell, his two companions stared with disbelieving eyes. The Ironborn on the ship also widened their eyes and gaped their mouths, everyone a little slow to react. Originally, they were watching a joke, but the joke turned into bloody violence. The neurotic man's speed was too fast, exceeding everyone's expectations. His ring, necklace, short sword, dagger, should all be mine now, the bald man said timidly, one side of his face twitching. "I paid the iron price. Paying the iron price was the only correct way for Ironborn to buy things. But this sentence was dangerous. 2 Ironborn woke up from their shock. Swish, swish, they drew their short swords, one stabbing at the bald man's chest, the other stabbing at his abdomen. The bald man was so frightened that he fell to the ground, screaming in horror. He flailed his short sword wildly, instantly stabbing one of the Ironborn's legs countless times. He was terrified, like a chick pecking at rice, the knife in his hand moving so fast that it created afterimages, puff, 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 constantly stabbing at one of the Ironborn's legs. This Ironborn had only managed to stab once, and hadn't even retracted his attacking knife, when the terrified bald man stabbed his thighs many times. The other Ironborn, after missing with his stab, quickly came to his rescue, taking a half step forward, bending over and thrusting the knife in his hand towards the bald man's neck. However, his movement suddenly froze. Someone shouted something, and without even turning his head, the neurotic bald man very suddenly backhanded with his knife, hitting him squarely in the abdomen. This stab was swift and ruthless, the entire blade plunged in. The bald man was tall, and his arms were unusually long. After stabbing once, he sat down and turned around, as fast as a monkey, his movements never stopping, puff, 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 continuously stabbing the Ironborn's abdomen and crotch. His movements were so fast that there was absolutely no pause in between. The Ironborn, whose legs had been stabbed, barely took half a step forward, then swayed and collapsed with a crash. In just an instant, blood stained his legs red, and he convulsed on the ground. The other Ironborn stood stiffly like a wooden puppet for a very brief moment, as if pausing, then fell down, still holding the knife in his hand, his eyes wide, already dead. His abdomen and crotch had been stabbed to a pulp by this madman in the blink of an eye. The Mountain watched all of this happen from upstairs, without saying a word. He knew that Polliver's knife would definitely kill someone. The Duke told the Mountain not to interfere in this matter, but the Duke knew in his heart that the Mountain would come. However, with the instruction not to interfere, the Mountain, who originally wanted to take action himself, turned it into his subordinates taking action. If the Duke nodded and said it was okay, the Mountain would likely kill all these Ironborn. That was the difference between a nod and a shake of the head. The Mountain and the Duke had lived together day and night for 20 years and already had an inherent understanding that was difficult for others to comprehend. When the Duke said no, perhaps the real meaning was the opposite. Others couldn't hear it, but the Mountain could understand it. Sometimes, the Duke needed someone to do some dirty work, and with just a look, the Mountain could understand. That was understanding. Similarly, when the Mountain instructed his subordinates to break the Ironborn's legs and arms, the subordinates understood perfectly. If the Mountain said to kill a few Ironborn, then it wouldn't just be Polliver taking action alone. These killing gods would let the Ironborn see what was called blood and terror. Killing one or a few Ironborn was, in the eyes of the Mountain and his loyal fans, a trivial matter. The Westerlanders had always had no goodwill towards the Ironborn, from the elderly to the children, without exception. Along the coast, whether it was the people of the Regis Tyrell family, or the people of the Westerlands, or the people of the North, or the people of the Riverlands Sigward, you couldn't find anyone who had any goodwill towards the Ironborn. The Ironborn on the ship let out a strange shout, different from any other place's command, loyal loyal loyal. Loyal loyal loyal. Loyal loyal loyal. In the sound of loyal loyal loyal, the Ironborn on the ship jumped onto the dock one after another, with battle axes, long swords, iron hammers, chain hammers, spears, broadswords, spiked clubs, all sorts of weapons. The Ironborn's weapons were also known for being large, heavy, and long. Looking at their weapons, you could tell that they focused on brute strength, strong attacks, and hard slams, but lacked flexibility and had rough combat skills. Along with the shouts of loyal loyal loyal, Ironborn ran out of several taverns on the dock, either 2 people, or 3 or 4 people. These Ironborn all had short swords and daggers. Because their weapons were heavy axes, it was naturally inconvenient to carry them around while eating, so they were all left on the ship. What they carried with them were short swords and daggers. They all brandished their swords and ran towards the bald man on the dock. Clang! 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 Someone was hitting their chest with a sword scabbard. That was the most valiant of the Clegane men, Dunson, slightly shorter than the bald Polliver, and also slightly slimmer, but his swordsmanship and accuracy in killing were still above Polliver's. Clack! 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 Sweetmouth Rafford, who had been squatting to watch the excitement, also stood up, drew his long sword and struck it against his armor. They weren't dressed as soldiers, but that didn't prevent ordinary people from also wearing armor. The armor only protected parts of the body, such as the neck, elbows, and calves, rather than clothing-like protection like full plate armor. Clack! 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 Among the Westerlanders who were watching, several young men with unfriendly faces drew their swords. They held a sword in one hand and a scabbard in the other, the back of the sword striking the scabbard, making a sound. The Ironborn, who wanted to chop the bald man into mincemeat, paused for a moment, because 5 or 6 Westerlanders with weapons walked out with the same rhythm and stood with the bald man. This was, after all, the Westerlands. Duke Tywin was not someone to be trifled with either. They could still argue if they just dealt with the murderer, but suddenly there were several more Westerlanders. With just a slight hesitation, more Westerlanders stood up from the streets, docks, taverns, small vendors, and dock workers, holding whatever weapons they could find, whether it was a knife, a sword, or a wooden stick, and tapped them together. The rhythm of clang, clang, clang turned into the rhythm of boom, boom, boom. The dozen or so Westerlander mercenaries who made a living on these docks also appeared, drew their weapons, and clapped them against their chest armor. The Westerlanders stood together in solidarity. Facing the 20 or so Ironborn who wanted to commit violence, they all stood up, tapping the same rhythm, their eyes fixed on the Ironborn. Their numbers were growing, quickly surrounding the Ironborn. The situation was on the verge of erupting. As long as the Ironborn dared to touch the bald man, this place would turn into a bloody brawl. On the 5 iron ore ships, more Ironborn with weapons emerged. However, the port guard also arrived. A squad of soldiers received a report that the Ironborn were molesting Westerlander women on the dock, causing a fight and murder. The port guard had never had any goodwill towards the Ironborn. The soldiers were furious when they heard this, their blood boiling, and they immediately rushed over. The centurion in charge of managing the port docks was a distant branch of the Lannister family, Arkyll Lannister. Holding back a belly full of anger, Arkyll led the angry soldiers over. From afar, he saw Dunsen, Rafford, and Polliver, these 3 killing gods, here, and was immediately taken aback. Chapter 110. Arkyll Lannister arrived on horseback. Being on horseback, he naturally sat high and saw far. Sweetmouth Raff had good connections with all sorts of people in Casterly Rock. Sweetmouth was his talent. No noble disliked flattery. Even if they knew Sweetmouth Raff was speaking flattering lies, the nobles still loved to hear it. Sweetmouth Raff was very familiar with Arkyll Lannister. Before following Gregor Clegane to Clegane's keep, Sweetmouth Raff and Sir Gregor were both celebrities in Casterly Rock, famous for their sweet mouth and evil. As a branch member of the Lannister family of Casterly Rock, and a centurion, Arkyll Lannister had many opportunities to interact with Sweetmouth Raff and Sir Gregor. Before Gregor decided to return to his territory to develop it, Gregor and Sweetmouth were both officers in the Duke's Guard. Gregor was a general, Sweetmouth was a squad leader, a sergeant. The City Guard and the Duke's Guard cavalry regiment had a close relationship. The centurions all knew each other well, and most of them were distant or close relatives of the Lannister family. Arkyll knew that Sweetmouth's sword was as sharp as his tongue. Sweetmouth's mouth was sweet, but his heart was not sweet at all. It was probably all black. When Arkyll's eyes met Sweetmouth Raff's on horseback, he understood Sweetmouth Raff's intention. Arkyll immediately understood what was going on. This was Sweetmouth Raff setting up a small trap to teach the Ironborn a lesson. He rode his horse into the circle of people and saw the 3 Ironborn at Polliver's feet. One was already dead, and the other 2 were still breathing, but obviously wouldn't survive. "Who is molesting women of the Westerlands in the street?" Arkyll shouted. His eyes swept over the Ironborn. The Ironborn were furious, but no one rushed forward. Because the Westerlands Guard had arrived. The soldiers were all well equipped with armor and longswords. Without a word, they surrounded the Ironborn. Shields were tightly joined together, and the tips of longswords were exposed above the shields, pointing at the Ironborn. The second batch of Ironborn who jumped ashore stopped and dared not approach any further. The arrival of the Casterly Rock Guard gave the people of the Westerlands more courage, and more civilians joined the outer encirclement with weapons in their hands. Everyone turned a blind eye to the 3 Ironborn lying in the pool of blood and glared at the others. In the tavern, the Mountain shouted, "Boss!" The boss had been waiting outside the door. Hearing the call, he immediately came out, nodding, bowing, and smiling. "My lord, what do you need? Wine. Yes, my lord. Soon, Westerland's coarse grain wine, Riverland's apple wine, Reach wine, and Arbor wine were brought up and placed in a row on the mountain's table. The boss didn't dare to ask what wine the mountain liked, so he brought all the wine. Get out. Yes, my lord. The boss replied obediently, retreating to the door, waiting for the mountain's next call. The mountain poured himself a drink and watched the situation on the dock. These 5 ships of iron ore belonged to Earl Gerald Goodbrother. The mountain had met Earl Gerald Goodbrother. He was the leader of the Hammerhorn, brave and good at fighting, and had a good personal relationship with Victorian Greyjoy, the commander of the Iron Fleet. He had 3 sons and 12 daughters. His 3 sons were triplets, and the 3 boys looked exactly alike. The mountain didn't know which of the triplets was the young man standing in front of a kill negotiating, nor did he care. Now, whether in terms of situation or numbers, the Ironborn were at an absolute disadvantage. Moreover, the Ironborn had also lost morally. The Ironborn had first molested the women of the Westerlands and then been stabbed to death by civilians. The Ironborn who were stabbed to death by ordinary civilians not only lost all their honor, but would also be ashamed to tell the story back home. Polliver's acting talent was as outstanding as his artistic hobby for human organs. The Westerlands crowd below was surging with anger, not for the sake of the 2 women who had been humiliated, but because the resentment in their hearts towards the Ironborn had found an outlet. The people especially hated the Ironborn. For hundreds of years, the Ironborn's plundering of the Westerlands people had left a heavy history of blood and tears for these people. Hundreds of years ago, the Ironborn had a glorious time. They ruled the southern coast, most of the Westerlands coast and the Riverlands coast, and even went deep inland. These histories of blood and tears have been passed down in the hearts of the people from generation to generation, until today. The people of the Westerlands hated the Ironborn in their bones. Although the bald man didn't look normal, he stabbed down 3 strong Ironborn by himself. He immediately became a great hero in the hearts of the onlookers. In such public sentiment, even if Akil wanted to arrest Polliver, it would be impossible, let alone that he didn't dare at all. The mountain raised his head and drank a large glass of wine. If Earl Gerald Goodbrother had brains, he would understand that the Westerlands was very disgusted with his constant price increases and greed, and had reached the limit of tolerance. A further step would be to ignite the torch of war. Regardless of how the Duke considered it, the mountain first buried a spark. As the world would be in chaos, the iron ore resources of the Iron Islands were indispensable and coveted. The Westerlands people's solidarity also gave him more confidence to lead troops to attack the Iron Islands, because with hatred, the soldiers would strive forward. Downstairs, Centurion Akil was also impolite. During the negotiation with the young leader of the Ironborn, he suddenly reached out and slapped the young leader hard. When the Ironborn shouted and raised their great axes, the guards' shields pushed forward together, and the people shouted loudly, suppressing the Ironborn's arrogance again. Gillen Goodbrother, you have to come with me. I want to hand you over to our Duke. Before you apologize and compensate for molesting our women, your 5 ships must not leave the port, Akil shouted sharply. Well done. The mountain smiled. He poured a glass of wine, smelled it. The Riverlands Tully family's apple wine was indeed good. The aroma, color, and taste were all very good. The fertile land of the Riverlands was even more coveted. In contrast, when the Westerlands lost its gold mines, it was a very barren, mountainous, and sparsely cultivated land. However, the biggest crisis was not the exhaustion of the gold mines, but the others from the north. Fortunately, the gods arranged for the Stark family to guard the north. Before the north was completely destroyed, the Westerlands was safe. It seemed that it was obviously difficult for the others to completely destroy the north. The mountain shook his head, driving the events of a few years later out of his mind. One must eat one bite at a time, and walk one step at a time. It was better to take care of the present first. In the first month of his marriage, he had to serve Jane well and sow a large number of hot seeds into her fertile land. It was a husband's duty and glorious obligation. Calculating the time, Bran Stark of the North had already been pushed off the broken tower by Jaime Lannister, successfully completing the assist for the 2 families' future tearing. King Robert was still hunting boars in the Wolf's Wood of the North and would not return to court until a month later. A month later, Littlefinger would also go to the wall with Jon Snow and Benjen Stark to fulfill his ultimate ideal of standing on top of the wall and pissing. Thinking of Littlefinger, the mountain was somewhat expectant. Well, some things must also be started. Since he had come, he couldn't come in vain, could he? Since he wouldn't die no matter how you looked at it, then who wouldn't want money, beauty, status, power and honor, the floating prosperity of the world, as an uncultured worldly person? Chapter 111. Tywin Lannister had, of course, long heard of the witch-woman's reputation. But the witch-woman did not give prophecies easily, and many nobles who sought her out were turned away. Lord Tywin had never been fond of blood mages. The witch-woman was a blood mage. Her prophecies came from the blood of those who sought them. The Duke's 20 years as Hand and 16 years of iron-fisted rule over the Westerlands made him lean more towards the science of maesters and his own strategies. However, there was no harm in asking the witch-woman about things that were unpredictable. Those chosen by the gods and who studied the mysteries, aside from a few charlatans, each possessed unique and arcane abilities. Even if Lord Tywin didn't take it seriously, he understood this clearly. There were many who used the mysteries to deceive, but the witch-woman was definitely not one of them. She came from the east and was a true witch. Her deceased husband was a spice merchant, a wealthy Westerlands merchant, who had encountered the witch-woman while doing business in Essos when he was young, and, captivated by her beauty, spent a fortune to bring her back, settling in Lannisport and marrying her. Because of the passage of time, the witch-woman's real name was no longer known. The Mountain had asked his maternal grandmother, but whether the witch-woman herself refused to say or had forgotten, she did not reveal her real name from her youth. Since becoming a witch, a person's name had been offered to the gods, and the witch-woman's name had also been offered to the gods. It was normal to not recall or to refuse to recall. After buying 5 ships of iron ore at the original price, the Duke kindly comforted the young Grand Good Brother, who had been threatened with death, and asked him to tell his father, Gerold Good Brother, that if the iron ore price didn't rise again, they would still be good friends. If the iron ore continued to rise in price, the Duke would cut off the Westerlands' supply of various necessities to the Iron Islands and inform the coastal lords through the king, so that everyone would uniformly raise the prices of necessities sold to the Iron Islands. In short, the price of iron ore from the Iron Islands should stop here and never rise again. Otherwise, Lord Tywin would never agree. Grand Good Brother agreed. The Ironborn who came this time were completely without arrogance, and 3 Ironborn were killed at the port docks of Casterly Rock by an ordinary civilian in the Westerlands with some mental instability at an unbelievable speed. This was a blatant humiliation to the Ironborn. This was also a very strong signal from the Westerlands to the Ironborn. Lord Tywin was not a weak man, on the contrary, his character was as hard as the black rock of Casterly Rock. Since the Mountain and his brothers had created a justifiable killing incident, the Duke went along with it, and after denouncing the Ironborn's lawlessness, bought 5 ships of iron ore and offered a few false words of comfort to the teenage boy. Grand Good Brother was the youngest of Gerold Good Brother's triplet sons. His character was not as fierce as his 2 older brothers, but he was more rational. However, in the eyes of the Ironborn, rationality was weakness. However, they couldn't be strong either. Even if they were all beaten to death, it was because they had first harassed the women of the Westerlands. After this incident, after the Mountain's repeated persuasion, 3 days later, Lord Tywin, with his 500 elite cavalry, arrived at Clegane village in a mighty procession with the Mountain. Naturally, the Duke's Archmaester, Pycelle, was also in attendance. Balin Butterwell, the sword instructor of Casterly Rock. Sandor Clegane, the Hound's sword teacher, and also Gregor Clegane's sword enlightenment teacher, led 5 centurions, and the 5 centurions led 500 elite cavalry. The Duke hadn't travelled in a long time, so he took it as an opportunity to go out for a walk and relax. Since his eldest daughter, Cersei Lannister, had married into the royal palace, and his most hopeful son, Jaime Lannister, had also entered the royal palace, 16 years had passed in the blink of an eye, and Jaime Lannister was still doing that damn Kingsguard. The Duke had always had a feeling of depression in his heart, which was that Casterly Rock in the Westerlands had no successor. Jaime was the best candidate, but that handsome boy made it clear that he would never return to inherit Casterly Rock. He would be a Kingsguard for life. Being a Kingsguard meant not being able to marry, not being able to have children, not being able to inherit, not being able to own land, not being able to possess personal wealth, and not being able to enjoy all the prosperity of the world. Just like an ascetic monk, the only thing they possessed was the highest honor among knights, glory and dedication, loyalty and iron blood. A knight was the highest honor that all warriors longed to obtain, and the Kingsguard was the highest honor that all knights longed to obtain. Only the most outstanding knights were qualified to become Kingsguard. Jaime gave up the right of inheritance for that damn honor, which became a hidden wound in Tywin's heart, which had never healed, and the wound deepened year by year. The only antidote was to persuade Jaime to abandon the honor of that damn Kingsguard and return to Casterly Rock to accept the inheritance. Although the Kingsguard was a lifetime position, being dismissed by the king was the greatest humiliation to a knight, but for Lord Tywin, as long as he could get Jaime back, he could accept even greater humiliation. Moreover, this so-called humiliation was worthless in the Duke's eyes. Lord Tywin had not smiled for 25 years, and there were quite a few unresolved matters piled up in his heart. In this accompanying team, his eldest younger brother, Kevin Lannister, the Minister of Salt, was also present. Snow salt production had formed a factory and assembly line operation, and began to supply the entire Westerlands. Snow salt was sent out, and coins flowed back. This was Gregor Clegane's contribution. When the snow salt production in the Westerlands increased, Tywin's second step was to sell it at a high price to the other side of the narrow sea, and not to any other place in the country. The trade routes of Lannisport could easily solve this sales problem. This greatly reduced Tywin's anxiety about the disappearance of the gold mine. This was also Gregor Clegane's contribution. Tywin knew this very well, but he would never praise him even a single word in front of the Mountain. The Mountain could not be praised, he was already arrogant enough, the most unruly of all the nobles in the Westerlands, so the Duke believed that he could only be severely reprimanded and rigorously disciplined. Although the Clegane's September was much smaller than the September of Casterly Rock, it had everything it should have. The Duke sat down in front of the witch woman. The witch woman did not wait for the Duke in front of the statues of the 7 gods, instead, after the Duke and the Maester, Kevin, Balin, and the 5 centurions paid their respects to the statues of the 7 gods, they came to the witch woman's room and requested an audience. On this point, Cersei 16 years ago was more domineering and fierce than the Duke. She directly broke into the witch woman's room, threatening that if the witch woman did not give her a prophecy, she would have her family's guards hang the witch woman. The Duke was greeted inside by the witch woman's assistant. The witch woman's assistant was named Jane Westerling. The newly married Jane returned to Clegane village and became her maternal grandmother's apothecary assistant and a student of mystical research, but Jane herself did not know. She thought that until her maternal grandmother found a student, she was just helping her maternal grandmother with some trivial matters within her ability. Chapter 112. The witch's long hair was neatly combed and draped over her shoulders, flowing like cloth to the ground. With the maids arranged for her by the Mountain, the witch no longer appeared dirty, disheveled, aged, or dark. But when she opened her mouth, her teeth were still black, shining black, looking like black jade stones. "Witch, may I ask about things unrelated to myself but that I want to know?" The Duke's authority was as unwavering as ever. The Duke's question was prompted by the Mountain's secret advice. The Mountain said that the witch's ability was not limited to seeing the future of the blood's owner through blood, but also to seeing fragments of the future and past without blood. This was a secret about the witch's hidden abilities revealed by the Mountain based on his understanding of her. An ability that Brynden Rivers, who disappeared beyond the wall, could easily achieve. But Brynden Rivers was an exception, he was a chosen one of the gods and possessed Targaryen royal blood. Most witches could not reach Brynden Rivers' level. The witch's prophecies were well known in Lannisport, but Tywin had never sought her out for a prophecy, even though he had unresolved problems in his heart. The Duke had his own stubbornness and confidence. If he couldn't solve it himself, and praying to the 7 gods couldn't solve it, he had already given up hope of seeking help from other witches. The witch nodded. The Mountain sat beside the Duke, towering over everyone else. The Mountain's imposing presence was natural and effortless. But the Duke and the witch's auras were not inferior to the Mountain's. "In Winterfell, I want to know if anything special has happened." These questions from the Duke were also suggested by the Mountain beforehand, to test the witch's prophetic abilities. The Mountain's civilization was several levels higher than the Duke's. Dealing with those who absolutely believed in gods and those who were absolutely superstitious, no matter how excellent they were, would be limited by the era itself. But the Mountain could freely switch his knowledge between different civilizations. A little wolf was pushed off a ruined tower by a lion, breaking both legs, falling into a coma, and will never be able to stand again. This is one of the 2 reasons why the wolf and the lion will begin to tear at each other. The witch did not have the crystal ball that the Mountain remembered from his university days in another civilization. The witch drank nightshade, which was black, causing her teeth to turn completely black. The Mountain also knew that in the distant east, some witches specifically drank blue nightshade, which caused their lips to turn blue. The witch's words caused Lord Kevin, Grand Maester Pycelle, Master-at-Arms Bronn, and the 5 centurions of the Lannister Guard cavalry to change their expressions. Did this mean that the North and the Westerlands would go to war? Would the kingdom, which had been at peace for 16 years, have a civil war? No one wanted to believe this absurd prophecy. If Lord Tywin were not here, Lord Kevin would have been unable to resist scolding the witch. These blood witches who spread fear and intimidation should not be trusted and their heads should be chopped off. The Mountain calmly stared at Lord Tywin. These prophecies were what he had taught the witch. Convincing his maternal grandmother, his family, to say the prophecies the Mountain wanted her to say was not difficult. The witch could foresee many things and possessed some dark abilities, but she was not omnipotent. The more one studied the occult, the more one felt there was to know. And as a living being, the witch was fragile. She also needed good food, a comfortable life, people's respect, family's love, and a strong sense of security. The witch wanted to verify the Mountain's prophetic abilities, blessed by the light of the 7 gods, more than anyone else. The will of the gods was mysterious and unpredictable. In dealing with the witch, the Mountain found it easier than dealing with ordinary people. Regarding mysterious and difficult problems, the witch did not consider illogical or extraordinary talents that suddenly emerged to be unreasonable. The will of the gods does not need to be explained to mortals. The Mountain found that the more people studied the occult and complex spells, the more accepting they were of inexplicable novelties and people who suddenly became exceptionally talented. The Duke was shocked, but he remained expressionless. He looked back at the Grand Maester behind him, and Grand Maester Pycelle immediately bent down. Send a raven to Lord Hogoshalot immediately. Lord Hogoshalot was a high-ranking nobleman from the Westerlands sent to accompany the royal family in the north. Yes, my lord. Grand Maester Pycelle left immediately. Craighall had ravens. The ravens came from the citadel of Tywin Duke in Casterly Rock. Although the ravens of Craighall were now named Craighall, they were all raised by Grand Maester Pycelle. Maester Hallis of Craighall was also a student of Grand Maester Pycelle. Although he was an eye sent by the Duke to monitor the Mountain, Grand Maester Pycelle now understood that this eye was only for show. There was a 99% chance that the Mountain and the Duke did not need a monitoring eye between them. Witch, you said there were 2 reasons for the wolf and the lion to tear at each other, so what is the other reason? The owner of this bottle of blood. The witch slowly took out a long, slender glass bottle from under the table. Who is the owner of this blood? The Mountain interjected, Father, when I was in King's Landing a month ago, Littlefinger Peter Baelish was unwilling to readily agree to my conditions for handing over the gold mines, so I took a sample of his fingertip blood and brought it back. My original intention was to have my maternal grandmother curse Peter Baelish through the blood, but my grandmother saw some other secrets of Littlefinger through the blood. What secrets? My grandmother didn't tell me. Duke Tywin stared at the witch, and the witch had already closed her eyes. Her hair moved without wind, as if someone had used their hand to lift her hair that was hanging on the ground in front of her, blocking her entire face. This change caused everyone to show different expressions. Without any external force, the hair moved by itself. Witch, what has Littlefinger done to the Lannisters? The Duke said in a deep voice. But the witch had already let out a slight snore. This made Master-at-Arms Bronn furious. Clang, his sword was drawn. A blood witch who dared to be presumptuous in front of the Duke was simply courting death. The Mountain said, Father, my grandmother has already given the answer. The 2 reasons for the wolf and the lion to go to war are 1, the lion pushed the little wolf off and broke his legs, and 2, Peter Baelish. Duke Tywin stared at the witch and said, Witch, if your prophecy is inaccurate, I will chop off your head. If it is accurate, you will pay 300 gold dragons. Next time you want to ask for a prophecy, it will start at 300 gold dragons. I need gold dragons to buy offerings to sacrifice to my god, otherwise, I will suffer backlash. The witch's lips did not move, but she was actually speaking. This was mysterious, but it was difficult to suppress the anger of others. What nonsense are you talking about? 300 gold dragons for a prophecy. The 5 centurions were all furious. Bronn and Lord Kevin sternly rebuked her. Duke Tywin reached out and shook his hand, and Lord Kevin, the centurions, and Master-at-Arms Bronn all shut up. Good. Duke Tywin said, Witch, if the prophecy comes true, I will pay you 300 gold dragons for each question. Kevin and the others all changed their expressions. However, the Mountain was not surprised. It was said that Duke Tywin was stingy, and he was indeed not generous. However, every penny Duke Tywin spent was absolutely spent wisely. For things he thought were worth it, money was definitely not a big problem. In this way, the Duke's 600 gold dragons went into the mountain's hands, building the chapel and covering the expenses of the chapel, earning it all back at once, and still having too much surplus. This was just the beginning. A very good start. Sir Gregor. Yes, father. Send your men to King's Landing and bring me Littlefinger Peter Baelish. Yes, father. Chapter 113. As soon as Pollyver entered, he stood in front of Sweetmouth Raff. He was tall, and Gregor could see him standing there. Gregor was even taller, and in the hall, with so few people, everyone could see him. But Pollyver clearly wanted this assignment, to go to King's Landing and capture Littlefinger Peter Baelish. Sweetmouth Raff had a smiling face, appearing indifferent, but his heart was full of anticipation. Who wouldn't want to perform meritorious service? Littlefinger Peter Baelish was just a master of coin, without guards, unskilled in martial arts, and his family's territory was the Fingers Peninsula in the Vale, a barren island covered only in moss, with only a few fishermen as its people, able to support only moss-eating goats. The goat-shit earl was unmarried, single, and taking him away would be simple, clean, and not troublesome. Executioner Dunson looked at Sir Gregor with burning eyes, eager to get this task, which was both an honor and a merit. Sweetmouth Raff had already made a great contribution, helping the Duke train the military whistle army control method for the Westerland's generals, and this time he thought it should be his turn. Mark the scribe stood at the back of the four, knowing he had no chance, which made him very depressed. That's how it was being a steward, there was no chance to be at the front in battle, and the opportunities to make contributions were all for Sweetmouth and the others. He oversaw the affairs of Clegane village, managing the armory, stables, granary, land, miners, people, and it was always difficult to get any opportunities. These things were very miscellaneous, and if you personally intervened without delegating to subordinate officials, you would have to deal with many things every day, but it seemed like you were an idle person. Laborious and unrewarding, that's what a steward's job was like. Gregor looked at his four loyal fans, knowing that everyone wanted this task. Scribe. Sir Gregor said. Yes, my lord. The scribe replied weakly. He knew the knight would ask him to go out and look at the stables, buildings, crops, or something. Nowadays, even the temple's lamp oil, servant management, cleaning, and diet were things he had to ask about and check. This time you are responsible for going to King's Landing to capture Littlefinger, Gregor said. The scribe was stunned. See how many people you need to go with you, and pick them from the cavalry yourself, the knight added. The scribe's head exploded with a bang. He felt like he was floating. He still couldn't believe it. My lord, if I go to King's Landing, there are so many miscellaneous affairs in the village. Lady Janie I is watching, Gregor said. There's Steward Tom Assman in the stables, Lady Ellen in the kitchen, Steward Ebert in the armory, Delia in the village, Witch in the temple, Hallie Scholar for the ravens, Pollyver for the miners, Sweetmouth Raff and Dunson for the cavalry. What are you worried about? My lord, I want to go with the scribe, he needs help, Pollyver stammered. He made awkward gestures to increase the momentum of his speech. He does need help, but not from you three. The scribe needs an opportunity to prove himself, Gregor said. My lord, when do I leave? The sooner the better. See how many people you need, whether to ride horses or take a carriage, I don't care about these. I want you to understand one thing, when you catch Littlefinger Peter Baelish, don't let the spider know. His little birds are all over the city, especially at the major city gates. Although the little birds are said to be children, the soldiers at the city gates and the shoemakers on the streets may be Varys's little birds. Yes, I know what to do. The scribe smiled, his expression relaxed. He was sure that this good thing was his, and his confidence suddenly returned. A joyful event makes one feel refreshed, and the scribe's face was radiant. Tell me how you will do it. Littlefinger is the master of coin, which is easy to handle. I'll go to his brothel and say there's a problem at the mint and he needs to take a look, then we'll wait for him outside the city, the scribe said. Good. My lord, if there is an emergency, I can handle it, Dunson said. None of you three are going. The scribe is a fresh face, the spider doesn't know him, and Littlefinger doesn't know him either. He's also young, only a teenager, and no one will be wary of a child who looks very friendly, Gregor said. Pollyver, Dunson and Sweetmouth were all disappointed. Sweetmouth's disappointment was in his heart. Pollyver's disappointment was on his face. Dunson's disappointment was in his breathing, his chest heaved and his breathing was rapid. From the Clegane lands in the Westerlands to Winterfell in the north, it was thousands of miles, and a large force would take 2 months, and a small force would take 1 month. But ravens fly a straight line in the air, shortening the journey by more than half, without having to first leave Golden Tooth, cross the Red Fork River, and enter the Riverlands for thousands of miles, directly north, flying straight over the Westerlands Mountains, passing over the Iron Islands, and entering the First Men's Barrows in the north, and not far in front of the First Men's Barrows is Winterfell, the seat of the Lord of the North. The Stark family. Maester Botley released the Raven day and night, and it arrived in Winterfell in 1 day and 1 night. Through the hands of Maester Luwin of the Citadel Tower, the Duke's letter reached the hands of Earl Tyget Swift. After reading the letter, the Earl immediately replied, not daring to delay, and before dawn, the Earl released his own raven. The Clegane's messenger raven rested at the Earl's, eating corn and minced meat. Another day and night, and at dawn, Maester Botley was awakened by Halley's scholar, holding Earl Tyget Swift's reply sealed with wax. Lord Tywin has ordered that upon receiving Earl Tyget's letter, he must be given it to him immediately. Witch's prophecy that the Westerlands would go to war with the North made Earl Tywin's heart unable to calm down, so he simply stayed in Clegane village, waiting for the raven's reply with all his attention. This matter was extraordinary. For a duke, the biggest thing was the outbreak of war. Maester Botley did not dare to neglect and immediately came to the 3rd floor and knocked on the duke's door. The sky was slightly bright, the duke got up, holding a candle, and broke the wax seal of Earl Tyget's letter. The scholar hurriedly took the candle, and the duke unfolded the parchment, which read short words, My Lord Duke, Lord Eddard's 4th son, Bran Stark, fell from the broken tower, breaking both legs, and has been in a coma for half a month. No one saw what happened when Bran fell, so Tyget doesn't know if Bran slipped or was pushed down. When the duke read the letter a second time, Maester Botley was already stunned. The witch's prophecy was at least mostly true, the little wolf broke his leg, he was in a coma and has not woken up. How did the witch know what happened in Winterfell in the north while she was in the Clegane village's temple? However, this was truly the ability of wizards, prophets, and skin changers. The scholar remembered the story of Brynden Rivers, the 1001 eyes sung throughout the 7 kingdoms. Since the witch had foreseen that the little wolf would fall from the broken tower and break his leg, was he slipping, or did someone push him down? The witch's prophecy said that a lion pushed down a little wolf. Tywin slowly rolled up the parchment, placed it on the candle, the flame burned the parchment, and the parchment began to burn and curl. Scholar, how many gold dragons did Steward Yarman take with him? Chapter 114. Duke Tywin had been to Winterfell in the north and seen the broken tower. The broken tower was a watchtower built by the ancestors of the Stark family, the highest point in Winterfell. Later, it was struck by lightning, causing a fire. The top of the tower collapsed inward, and the upper half of the tower was burned black. Since then, no one had ever gone up to the watchtower, and it became the broken tower of the Stark family as it was today. Why did the little wolf climb the broken tower? Tywin didn't know. Why was the lion also in the broken tower? Which lion was in the broken tower? Jaime? Tyrion? Cersei? Duke Tywin also didn't know. Since the lion pushed the little wolf, this was murder. Then, what did the little wolf see of the lion that made the lion have to kill the little wolf? Duke Tywin didn't know even more. He was not a prophet, not a warg, nor a wizard. He could not see the truth in other timelines. Duke Tywin decided to seek help from the witch. The Starks of the North were not to be trifled with. He also had a marriage alliance with the Tully family of the Riverlands to the east of the Westerlands. Once a war broke out, Riverrun would 100% join the North. And the Vale, governed by the Arryn family in the Far East, was also the son-in-law of the Tully family of Riverrun, and had close ties with the North. If war broke out, the 3 lands would join forces, and the Westerlands would become a 1-against-3 situation. Although the king was the son-in-law of the Westerlands, the king and the Stark of the North had grown up together since childhood and had a relationship closer than brothers. It could be seen from the fact that the king travelled thousands of miles to invite Stark to be the hand of the king instead of inviting his father-in-law Tywin that the king was more willing to trust and support the Stark family. The situation was very unfavourable for the Westerlands. Because of the political relationship of marriage, the territories of the 3 dukes and 3 great nobles of the North, the Riverlands and the Vale became one family. The wife of the Duke of the North, Eddard Stark, Catelyn Tully, was the eldest daughter of Hoster Tully, the Duke of Riverrun in the Riverlands. The second daughter of Duke Hoster Tully was the wife of Duke Arryn of the Vale. Jon Arryn, the Duke of the Vale who was the hand of the king in the royal palace, suddenly died, and the real person in power in the Vale now was Catelyn's younger sister, Lisa Tully. Once the North and the Westerlands went to war, an unfavourable 1-against-3 situation would be formed. And the Westerlands had no allies. If the King's Storm's End did not want to help either side, the only ones the Westerlands could ally with were the Reach in the south and the Iron Islands in the sea. Dorne in the far south was also a potential enemy of the Westerlands, because 16 years ago, Duke Tywin of the Westerlands ordered the Mountain to rape and murder Princess Elia Martell in the nursery of the Red Keep in King's Landing. This was a blood feud that had not yet been settled between the two sides. After careful consideration, Duke Tywin confirmed that this war could not happen. At least not a full-scale war. Why did the lion push the little wolf down the broken tower? This was the key to the problem. Duke Tywin had to understand the specific situation. From the letter from Earl Tygett combined with the witch's prophecy, it could be seen that the lion did push the little wolf down the broken tower, but no one in Winterfell knew this. This was also the fundamental reason why the lion could still safely be a guest in Winterfell in the north. If the war was caused by this in the future, it would mean that the truth of the matter would eventually be known to the Stark family. How to know? The greatest possibility was naturally that the unconscious little wolf woke up and told the truth. Then, the conflict rose and the war broke out. Tywin could no longer calm down. Fortunately, Sir Gregor had a grandmother who was a witch. Fortunately the witch lived in the chapel built by Gregor, and fortunately the witch could accurately see the fragments of time and space and tell him a prophecy worth 1,000 gold dragons. For a war that was bound to break out, of course, whoever prepared first and whoever foresaw the future trend would be the winner. Now Duke Tywin had received the news first because of the witch's prophecy. He would definitely prepare for the war first and take the lead. In military terms, Tywin looked down on Duke Eddard Stark of the North. Eddard's other little wolves, the oldest was less than 16 years old, were all children who didn't understand anything. Now the only problem was the king's attitude. If war was inevitable, what would the king's attitude be? Tywin could not predict. But this was not important, because Sir Gregor had a wizard grandmother, a real capable witch, whose prophetic abilities had already been verified for the first time. This is the reward for the first prophecy, 300 gold dragons, Tywin said. The accompanying supervisor, Ealman, took out 3 bags, shook them, and the sound of gold coins rustled. Ealman was Duke Tywin's financial supervisor, and he placed the 300 gold dragons in front of the witch. The witch was expressionless, without sorrow or joy. The assistant Jenny helped the witch accept the 3 bags of gold coins. The heavy gold dragons were heavy in the hand. I still need to verify the second prophecy, the Duke said. The witch did not say a word. Witch, I am very eager to know one thing, the Duke gestured, and the accompanying supervisor took out 3 more bags of gold dragons and placed them in front of the witch. The witch shook her head. Duke Tywin, after you catch Lord Peter, everything will be clear as soon as you ask. There is no need to spend money to ask me. The Duke pondered for a moment and said, I have to wait a month to invite Lord Peter. I can't wait. If war was destined to break out, then time was the most important military resource. Many things had to be prepared in advance. Before preparing, it was necessary to know the cause and effect of the war. Ealman pushed the money bag closer to the witch. Okay, Duke, if I know the question you want to ask, I will definitely tell you. Who pushed Bran Stark down the broken tower? The witch was silent. Sir Gregor did not explain this to her. Gregor only told her the cruel thing that the little wolf was pushed down the broken tower by the lion and broke his legs and could no longer stand. I can't answer you this question, the witch said lightly. Duke Tywin was immediately very disappointed. The witch was unwilling to answer. Should he threaten her to tell the truth, or respect the witch? Tywin chose the latter. Because if he did not respect the witch would slightly modify a very important prophecy in the future, which would have incalculable and serious consequences for the plan formulated by Duke Tywin based on the prophecy. I have to pray first. If God lets me say it, I will tell you. Duke, come again tomorrow morning. Yes, witch. Tywin was still majestic, but his tone was respectful. Ealman reached out to take the gold coin bag, but was stopped by Duke Tywin. Sir Ealman, put it down. He must know the answer. Pay the money first. Father. Jenny said. She picked up the gold coin bag and was about to return it to Sir Ilman, but Duke Tywin gave her a look, and Jenny stopped. The next day, Tywin came early. This time, there was no assistant Jenny in the witch's room. "Duke, please let the Maester, Earl Kevin, Sir Ilman, and your Centurion guards all go out." Duke Tywin looked back at the people around him, and everyone left. Grand Maester Pycelle walked to the end, and he gently closed the door. "This matter is very serious, Duke. I dare to tell you the truth only if you guarantee with the honor of the seven gods and the Lannister family that you will not chop off my head." The witch stared at the Duke and said. The witch's eyes had a mysterious and terrible aura. Chapter 115. "I swear on the seven gods and the honor of House Lannister that from this day forward, no matter what terrible prophecies the witch makes, I will not harm her, I will only be grateful." Duke Tywin's oath was as commanding as an order in battle. His face and tone were cold, showing not a trace of gratitude. The witch nodded, revealing her black and shiny teeth, her smile eerie and filled with a dark aura. She looked at Duke Tywin with an expression of godlike authority, and no matter how dignified Duke Tywin was, her eyes and expression were condescending, carrying the aura of looking down upon mortals. However, Duke Tywin didn't mind the witch's assertiveness, his stern expression remained as unyielding as iron. Was Duke Tywin's oath genuine? No one knew for sure, perhaps not even the Duke himself. When circumstances changed, his oath might dissipate like smoke. As a true Grand Duke of political cunning and an iron fist, Duke Tywin spoke humbly to the witch because he thought further ahead and saw deeper. The witch's remarkable ability to prophesy could be used by him, and was irreplaceable. Back in the days of the Targaryen dynasty, 2 consecutive kings had promoted Brynden Rivers, a Thousand Eyes and One, to Hand of the King, second only to the king and above all others. Why? Because his talent was rare. Brynden Rivers was a bastard. Although he was later legitimized by his royal father, he was still just a warrior. From warrior to Hand of the King, all because he suddenly possessed the ability to warg, and the ability to possess a Thousand Eyes and One was extraordinary. Thus, because of his sudden ability, Brynden Rivers went from an ordinary warrior to the Hand of the King, eliminating rebels, suppressing traitors, fighting enemies and thwarting political enemies' conspiracies, achieving victory after victory. Tywin naturally wanted a super figure like a Thousand Eyes and One by his side, and the verification of the witch's prophecies had already moved him, but Duke Tywin's emotions were as cold as frost and as ruthless as iron, completely different from other people's excitement. Assuming he had a witch for her prophecies and the mountain for his martial prowess, Duke Tywin felt much more at ease. Could the witch reach the level of a super figure like Brynden Rivers in Duke Tywin's mind? Duke Tywin had his own keen eyes and accurate judgment. "Your Grace, Bran Stark is a skilled climber. He is 7 years old this year, but he has 2 years of experience climbing the ruined tower. He knows every hole, every patch of weeds, which layer the crows live on, and which layer the snowbirds inhabit. He has a habit of climbing the ruined tower." "Yes, I'm listening." Duke Tywin's waist and neck were as straight as a spear. He was pushed from the highest level by a lion. The lion didn't want to cripple him, of course, but to kill him. "Who?" "Jaime Lannister." Duke Tywin's breathing became slightly heavier, almost imperceptible, but the witch saw it clearly. "Why?" Tywin's voice remained steady. Jaime was discussing court secrets with Cersei at the top of the ruined tower and the child overheard. Silence. Deadly silence. "This is not reasonable," Duke Tywin said. His expression did not change, but the veins on his neck bulged. "I know what you want to say. The king and your grace took a large group of people to the Wolf's Wood to hunt, and they won't be back for at least half a month. That is the safest place in all of Winterfell. No one would go up to the ruined tower, which has been abandoned for many years, especially not to the highest level." Duke Tywin stared at the witch, whose soft eyes looked back at him. The Duke's piercing gaze had no effect on her. "Witch, I want to ask you another question." Duke Tywin didn't say "I want," but "I will," an affirmative tone that brooked no rebuttal or doubt. "I will say what I know. Madam Witch, how long has it been going on between Jaime and Cersei?" Duke Tywin used the respectful title Madam for the first time. "I can only say, a very long time." The Duke was not satisfied with the witch's answer. "I will pay you another 100 gold dragons for the answer to this question," the Duke said, his face already cold and his eyes as icy as steel. This showed that the Duke had always had doubts in this regard, but he kept them in his heart, a self-deceiving question he dared not touch, simply because the impact of this matter was too great. Once the volatile king found out, he would not hesitate to chop off Jaime and Cersei's heads. The strength of the king's family at Storm's End and the power of the nobles in the Crownlands would become enemies of the Westerlands. Of course, there would also be the North, the Riverlands, the Vale, the Reach, and Dorne, who had a blood feud. Once the war started, the Westerlands would be finished. It was essential to keep the king in the dark, just as he was now. Even if it was exposed, there had to be a plausible denial. Of course, the foolproof method was to kill King Robert, establish a small, ignorant King Joffrey, and then control Joffrey in his own hands, thereby eliminating the disaster. Then, Cersei would stay in the Red Keep, and Jaime would return to the Westerlands as the heir to Casterly Rock. In this way, my wish would be fulfilled. Madam Witch, tell me the specific situation, and I will make you the High Priestess of the Westerlands, with a monthly salary of 10 gold dragons, overseeing all the priests and septons in the Westerlands. The generals and knights of the Westerlands must pay you their respects. Duke Tywin said this, naturally deciding to reuse the witch. He didn't want the Westerlands to be destroyed or the Lannisters to be exterminated. Now that the witch knew secrets she shouldn't know, would he strangle her if she didn't follow him? However, this matter was too big, and the witch decided to use euphemistic words. She would not be foolish enough to say it directly. Your Grace, what you suspect in your heart may be the truth. Duke Tywin's heart shook. What he suspected in his heart was indeed the truth, Prince Joffrey, Prince Tommen, and Princess Myrcella. Although the witch did not say it explicitly, the Duke already understood. If what the witch said was true, King Robert would kill Jaime and Cersei immediately, stick their heads on spears, and then raise an army to destroy the Westerlands and exterminate all the Lannister family's relatives. Duke Tywin's cold sweat instantly soaked his underwear. The question he had hidden in his heart for many years, not daring to seek an answer, finally received a definite answer today. But his face did not change. Madam Witch, is there a way to resolve the crisis? The Duke asked in a deep voice, with a sharp edge in his tone. Yes. That simple word was the most beautiful sound the Duke had heard in decades. Chapter 116. In the witch's heart, there was no doubt that the mountain was the true prophet. It was just that the Duke didn't know it. However, after magically probing the mountain, besides predicting the future, his other magical abilities were completely blank. This was normal. Since the seven gods had given the mountain a rare and unique physique and unmatched martial prowess, plus the great prophetic ability, that was already enough. If the mountain also mastered magical powers, he would become a godlike figure. Usually, a person couldn't always have good luck, and the same went for abilities. The seven gods couldn't concentrate all abilities on one person. Duke Tywin completely believed what the witch said, for one reason, because of the details. The witch spoke of the details. Last night, the witch was convinced by the mountain and accepted his great prophecy of the future also because of the details. Afterward, the witch secretly used a magical potion to test the mountain. The magical potion showed no abnormal reaction, and the mountain's prophecy passed the witch's test. The witch didn't sleep the entire night last night. But her spirit was surprisingly good. She had reached a small deal with her step-great-grandson, the mountain. The mountain would secretly assist the witch in completing the most important event of her life, to make Jane Westerling unknowingly become her apprentice, inheriting her witchcraft legacy. Jane was currently helping her grandmother with some chores, and she herself didn't know her grandmother's true intentions. As for the conversation with Duke Tywin this morning, the witch had already foreseen it all last night. Although she wasn't a great prophet who could prophesy the entire world, she could easily see people and things in time fragments that were very close, and she could also see some people's life and death events and key life ups and downs through blood. Of course, as for whether the witch would tell the truth she saw, and how much she would tell, that depended on her personal judgment and will. When Duke Tywin walked out of the witch's room, lunchtime had already passed. Neither the Duke nor the witch had eaten breakfast or lunch. No one dared to disturb the conversation between the Duke and the witch. The Duke looked to be in good spirits. The Duke sat at the dining table by the window, eating breakfast and lunch together. His eyes looked out the window, to the Clegane training ground outside, which had doubled in size, where a lithe young woman was practicing horseback archery. This woman was the mountain's adopted daughter, Julie Clegane. For more than 2 months, with daily training, Julie's body had become stronger, she had grown taller, and she had the charm of a mature young woman. She had learned a body of banditry, and among the brothers, she spoke nothing but foul language. Being with the bandits, it was difficult for Julie to become a lady. Julie rode past a wall, on which there were 3 targets, the center of the targets painted red. The horse's speed didn't decrease. Julie drew her bow and fired an arrow from horseback, and with a swoosh, it hit the bullseye of the first target. The scholars, knights, and instructors surrounding Duke Tywin were also watching Julie practice archery. Julie's archery skills, in the eyes of the Duke and the knight instructors, were average. First, Julie's horse speed wasn't fast, not the speed of a charge. Second, the targets were inanimate objects, and the bull's-eye was fixed, while on the battlefield, the enemy would move. Each of the 5 centurions of Tywin's cavalry guard could hit 3 bull's-eyes in a row on a faster warhorse. The scholars, earls, supervisors, knights, and centurions watched Julie practice archery with cold eyes, and they didn't think much of it. Julie rode past, circled her horse back, and as her horse flew past the target, she shot another arrow with a swoosh, hitting the bull's-eye of the second target. Although the little girl's archery skills were average, and her horsemanship was also average, she practiced repeatedly. After shooting a quiver of arrows, the little girl hit the bull's-eye with every arrow. She rode her horse to the front of the target, jumped off, pulled out the arrows, and put them back in the quiver. "What do you see?" The Duke looked at his courtiers beside him with eyes like nails. No one answered. Everyone didn't see anything unusual. The little girl's archery and horsemanship were quite satisfactory, and her practice was also very diligent and meticulous. But she was still lacking. Julie also noticed the Duke and his party watching her. The little girl didn't care and continued to practice archery. This time, her horse speed was the same, but she fired 2 arrows in a row, hitting the bull's-eyes of 2 targets. This was Julie's mandatory lesson after completing her daily patrol mission, archery. Her father, the Mountain, required her to draw her bow and shoot at least 150 times every day, and the little girl's requirement for herself was to complete at least 300 times. First, she sought accuracy, second, she sought speed, and third, she sought rapid-fire archery. Shooting an arrow, and then the second arrow came, that was rapid fire. Shooting arrows on a running warhorse was already very difficult. The Mountain required Julie to practice every day. As long as there were no special tasks to complete, she had to practice hard on the training ground. To become a sharpshooter, the only trick was to practice hard and accumulate a large number of times. When accumulated to a certain number of times, the accuracy of archery would naturally increase. Julie kept her father's words in mind and practiced horseback archery hard whenever she had time. Again and again, until she couldn't pull the bow at all. After Duke Tywin watched Julie's second round of rapid-fire archery, he pointed at Julie outside with the chopsticks in his hand. "Sir Bronn of the Blackwater." "Yes, Your Grace." "Didn't you see anything different about Julie?" Bronn of the Blackwater concentrated and looked at Julie's horseback archery again, and he shook his head. "Your Grace, I can't see any difference between Miss Julie's archery and our archery." Outside the wall of the great training ground, the sound of the Clegane cavalry training their charge was also constantly coming. Although there were less than 100 people, the training was meticulous and never slackened. These cavalrymen received the highest military pay in the entire Westerlands. Every day, besides eating, they trained. Because of this military pay, the Mountain was greatly ridiculed by the nobles of the Westerlands, as after-dinner gossip. Only a fool would pay a soldier 1 gold dragon a month. The military pay for the Mountain's 100 cavalrymen could pay the wages of 300 cavalrymen. Without a doubt, the Mountain was that fool. It was just that, given the Mountain's brutality and bloodthirsty ruthlessness, no one dared to laugh at him in person. The Duke ate his fill, put down his chopsticks, and said, "Go call Miss Julie over." A centurion immediately went. Soon, Miss Julie rode her horse to the window of the restaurant. She sat on her horse, her body as straight as a gun, her eyes sharp. Through the window, she was slightly shorter than the Duke. In front of the Duke, the little girl had no fear. "Miss Julie, is your right shoulder soft armor?" the Duke asked. "Yes, Your Grace." "You are in full armor, why use soft armor on your right shoulder?" "Your Grace, I am small and weak. My father ordered me to wear heavy armor during training to exercise my strength and bones. Covering my right shoulder with heavy armor would make my right arm unable to lift up quickly when I raise my arm to shoot an arrow. My father designed a light soft armor for my right shoulder to reduce the weight, so I can train a quiver in one breath without having to rest in the middle." The Duke nodded. "Scholar, reward Miss Julie with a gold dragon." "Yes, Your Grace." Scholar Potter's heart moved. The Duke didn't have the habit of rewarding small soldiers with gold dragons. Why did he do this? It would definitely not be a sudden burst of kindness. The Duke's heart was as hard as iron. Julie thanked the Duke for the reward, and after receiving the Duke's permission, she rode away and continued to practice archery. Sir Braun of the Blackwater. Yes, Your Grace. I order you to immediately return to Casterly Rock and order the officials to replace all the right shoulder armor of the 2,000 garrison troops in Casterly Rock with light soft armor, then issue a conscription order to gather manpower in the territory of Casterly Rock to train a team of 2,000 archers, and their right shoulder armor should all be the lightest soft armor. Yes, Your Grace. Sir Braun of the Blackwater immediately saluted and left, returning to Casterly Rock. Centurions, the right shoulder armor of the 500 cavalrymen of the guard will all be replaced with light soft armor after returning to Casterly Rock. Yes, Your Grace. The 5 centurions bowed together in agreement. Scholar, send out ravens, order all parts of the Westerlands, the soldiers of each family must train in battle and fighting every day from today onwards, and I will inspect them in turn. All family professional soldiers, whether infantry, cavalry, or archers, must not use heavy armor on their right shoulders, only light soft armor is allowed. Yes, Your Grace, I will do it immediately. The right arm is not only for raising to shoot arrows, but also for wielding swords and spears. In a life and death battle, if the right shoulder and arm can be lighter by 1 point, the movement will be faster by 1 point, and naturally there will be 1 more point of winning. Chapter 117. The Mountain was on horseback, training his cavalry in offense and defense. They were practicing long-range throwing. Not throwing at targets, but throwing at each other. Throwing and defending at the same time. Long-range javelin throwing was the most effective initial attack when launching a battle formation charge. However, no one in the 7 kingdoms specifically trained all their soldiers to be proficient in this technique. The Mountain was the first to train all his cavalry in this way. Those with accurate long-range javelin throwing skills were usually landed knights or noble generals. Generally, only landed knights and noble generals had the foundation for such training. Firstly, they didn't have to worry about food and clothing, and secondly, they didn't have to worry about not having war horses and a large number of training javelins. The tips of the training javelins were specially made to shatter upon strong impact, preventing fatal injuries to comrades participating in the training. The first basic step of training javelin throwing did not involve using comrades as opponents. Just like Julie's archery training in the training grounds, the first javelin training targets were inanimate, stationary targets. When a rider on a galloping horse could hit the bullseye of a stationary target with 100% accuracy, the second step was moving target throwing training. Once the second step of moving target throwing training was completed with 100% accuracy, the third step was live javelin throwing training against people. Only real person-to-person combat best simulated the real battlefield environment. And this kind of live javelin sparring. Charging at each other on horseback, maneuvering, chasing, and throwing javelins at the enemy from a suitable distance. This kind of training, apart from a few noble generals and landed knights who had the conditions, more than 90% of centurions, knights, and soldiers had no professional training in systematic javelin throwing. This kind of training would damage a large number of training javelins. The weapons officers had to manufacture a large number of training javelins to meet this need. Any sharpshooter was nurtured with a large number of training javelins. Without capital, time, space, strict requirements, and a cruel instructor, it was difficult to develop this javelin throwing technique that required absolute arm strength. Moreover, the Mountain's requirement was that every soldier must reach the level of a sharpshooter. However, the Duke did not doubt the Mountain's training level, because those who did not meet the standard were usually not eliminated, but were directly trained to death by the Mountain. When the Mountain was training the Duke's family guard cavalry, substandard soldiers all faced the threat of death. And the Duke believed that every one of these cavalrymen personally trained by the Mountain knew the Mountain's brutality and ruthlessness. Anyone who dared not train desperately would not be rewarded with a beautiful golden dragon, but with cruel torture until death. Lord Tywin rode his horse with his guard cavalry, watching the Mountain lead his Clegane cavalry in javelin throwing training, his face expressionless. The Mountain's talent in military training, like his personal martial strength, was unmatched in the Duke's opinion. Although Master-at-Arms Bronn objected to the Mountain's cruelty, the Duke and the Master-at-Arms had to admit that the soldiers trained by the Mountain were all dauntingly ruthless. To put it nicely, they were all absolute warriors. Those who were greedy for life and afraid of death would not die on the battlefield, they had already died on the Mountain's training ground. When this batch of soldiers who survived the mountain's training went to the battlefield, it would be their enemies who would die. With the mountain's whistle, each time the attacking side threw a javelin, they all hit the mark. Although the enemies dodged and moved quickly, they couldn't avoid the whistling, lightning-like javelins. When they couldn't avoid these accurate javelins, the defending side's round shields came into play. The javelins pierced the round shields, wood chips flew and shattered, and after a whistle sound of attack and throwing, the sounds of bangs and crashes were endless, and the momentum was amazing. This kind of accuracy, once on the battlefield, would catch the enemy off guard at the beginning. In the Seven Kingdoms, there were not a large number of soldiers and generals in organized units who had undergone such javelin offensive and defensive training. Tywin Lannister's guard cavalry hadn't, nor had his city guard. The throwing power of a javelin was far greater than an arrow, and the weight of the javelin itself amplified the impact of the throw. Once the training javelin's head was replaced with the best iron head, it was obvious that it could pierce through the shield's defense. Longbow hard arrows could shoot through shields, and the arrowhead would connect the arm wearing the shield buckle to the shield. Tywin Lannister's only regret was that the mountain's cavalry was too small. If there were 500 such troops, they could form a vanguard legion to break through battle formations at the fastest speed. But the mountain's plan was to train only 100 such cavalrymen, plus 50 reserve cavalrymen. Tywin Lannister understood why the mountain was giving each of these soldiers a golden dragon's salary, which was 3 times the salary of ordinary cavalry. But the content of the training was something that no other army had ever done. This golden dragon was not as easy to get as people thought. The level of these soldiers was very high, and the training time was not very long. What did this mean? Many soldiers secretly added extra training late at night in order to meet the mountain's requirements 100%. The intensity of the training was rare. Tywin understood this, because many of the family soldiers in his guard cavalry had experienced this. Those who did not meet the standard, apart from eating, were actively adding extra training in any time that should have been used for rest. Some even secretly got up at night to add basic movements in the training ground, a simple long sword thrust, all the soldiers practiced thousands of times. This kind of training was very cruel, and many soldiers would rather go to the battlefield than undergo such training. With the mountain's whistle, the cavalry's pursuit formation turned into a column, one after another. They ran past the place where the training javelins were piled up, and the officers threw the javelins out, and the cavalry caught 2 javelins one after another. The horses did not stop, and they passed by like flowing water. This kind of training consumed a lot of javelins. As long as a javelin hit the shield, the javelin's head and the front part of the shaft would shatter and could not be used a second time. The weight and length of the training javelin must be exactly the same as the real javelin. This could develop a godlike feel and improve accuracy. Each cavalryman had a round shield on his back. The round shield was easy to carry on the back and would not get in the way when charging. Rectangular shields were more suitable for infantry defense and not suitable for cavalry charges. Tywin Lannister noticed that the mountain's cavalry's armor on their right arm and shoulder was heavy armor, which was not good. Heavy armor had the best defense, but it was easier to make the cavalry's right arm tired and unable to lift. "Go and call Sir Gregor over," Tywin Lannister said softly. Sir Kevin immediately rode forward to call the mountain. The mountain and Sir Kevin came before the Duke. The Duke said, "Sir Gregor, all your soldiers' armor on their right shoulder and arm must only use light chain mail." "Yes, father," the mountain said. The mountain understood Tywin Lannister, but Tywin Lannister did not understand the current mountain. The mountain knew that Tywin Lannister would see the improvement of Julie's right shoulder chainmail replacing heavy armor, which was not the mountain's original creation, but came from his historical knowledge of ancient China. It originated from King Zhao Wuling's adoption of nomadic clothing and archery, which changed the wide-sleeved robes into narrow-sleeved cross-collared garments, turning a weak country into a strong one. The mountain knew that the clothing of many ethnic minorities in Earth was cross-collared and fastened on the left shoulder and body were neatly dressed, but the outer robe sleeves did not connect to the right shoulder, and when the weather was slightly warmer, many men would expose their right shoulder. Some historians have studied history and concluded that this originated from the fact that it was more convenient to wield weapons and control horses and shoot arrows in actual ancient warfare, and over time, it became the style of ethnic costumes. The mountain took Julie for practice. Mediocrity is not envied, but those who show their talents die quickly. So the mountain did not say anything, and let the Duke see it himself and then order the promotion, naturally weakening his extraordinariness. "Sire, your soldiers' round shields seem to have undergone a little change." "Yes, father. The oak shields used in the past were all wrapped in iron sheet on the front or iron sheet on the edges. Our shields have a layer of iron sheet specially added by the blacksmith at the position of the arm lock on the back of the shield, so that it can better resist longbow hard arrows and prevent them from shooting through the shield and injuring the arm. Tywin Lannister's heart stirred again. He spent 700 golden dragons in the witch's apothecary in less than 2 days this time. As the witch said, not only would he be able to earn it back soon, but his actual gains had far exceeded the monetary value of a mere 700 golden dragons. The mountain had unintentionally given him a great benefit for improving shield weapons. However, the mountain was still a little short of great wisdom and did not know that these could be taken even further. Like the scholars and knights around the Duke, he was still a little short of the vision of great wisdom. Scholar, pass the order down, all the shields in the Westerlands, at the position of the arm lock, add double-layered iron sheet on both the front and back. Yes, Lord. Why aren't all the shields double-layered? Because of the weight. The Duke was expressionless, but in a very good mood. The witch was his great prophet, a seer-like figure, and the mountain was undoubtedly his great lucky general. Sir Gregor. Yes, Father. Your shields, at the position of the arm lock, also add 2 layers on both the front and back, instead of just adding a single layer on the back. A single layer cannot effectively resist longbow hard arrows. Yes, Father, the mountain said with a look of sudden admiration. You taught the Ironborn a lesson at the port of Casterly Rock last time, and Sweetmouth Ralph also helped me train the military whistle command method for the Westerland noble generals. I know your contributions, and I will reward you with the 5 ships of iron ore that the Ironborn pulled over last time. You can send someone to pull them over from Casterly Rock. Yes, Father. Also, I order you to train 500 Clegane cavalrymen, with a reserve of 100 cavalrymen. Each of them must be proficient in javelin throwing, archery, long spear, lance, and swordsmanship. Chapter 118. I cannot complete the task. Father. The mountain said blandly. He very much wanted to take this opportunity to expand his forces. Not necessarily 500 cavalry, 300 would be good, especially since it was Lord Tywin's order. It was legitimate and he wouldn't have to worry about being envied by the nobles. Besides, the war was less than a year away from breaking out. But a little prevarication seemed more appropriate. Find the money yourself, I'll give you the men. Lord Tywin said coldly. He had just paid 700 gold dragons to the witch. No vassal dared to defy Lord Tywin's orders, but the mountain was an exception. Father, what kind of men are you giving me? The Knights of the Rock Guard Cavalry Regiment? Or the Lannisport City Garrison? I refuse. The mountain said with certainty. Help Lord Tywin train his guard? Forget it. After all the effort, he would just transfer them back with an order. To train such elite cavalry, they had to be his own men, with the name Clegane. Lord Tywin's face grew even colder. I will give you an additional 100 households of small folk. The taxes from 100 households are not much. The mountain was unmoved. Recruitment is also very limited. Ordinary commoners simply cannot pass such high-intensity training. 100 households of small folk, was that to send away a beggar? Lord Odber of Lannisport had more than 10,000 households of small folk. Maester, knights, centurions, Sir Kevin, and others all looked at the mountain coldly. Sir Kevin had never liked the mountain, and even less a mountain who had soldiers of his own family. If the mountain became stronger, Sir Kevin would be even more hostile and resentful. He could never feel any goodwill towards the mountain, much less trust him. A beast should not be allowed to sharpen its claws more and more. Once the beast gets out of control, it will hurt people. Especially now that it is a time of peace, the king is the duke's son-in-law, the queen is the duke's daughter, and the king's side, diet, daily life, entry and exit alert, are all Lannister. The Lannisters are powerful and wealthy in the west, so there is no need to train a beast like the mountain to be even stronger. Because beasts hurt people. But Lord Tywin obviously didn't think so. Kevin felt that the Duke had deviated from his course recently because of the mountain's series of inventions. He vaguely felt that the Duke was preparing for war. This gave Sir Kevin a very absurd feeling. He wondered what the Duke and the witch had said behind closed doors. That pretentious witch should be beheaded. The Duke stared at the mountain and said coldly, Kyswick is gathering his former men in Lannisport, at least 1,000 men. Kevin said, Lord Duke, Sir Gregor. Lord Tywin glared at Kevin. Kevin choked and closed his mouth. Father, Kyswick is gathering his old troops to form the Clegane mercenaries, with the aim of making money. According to my current family cavalry training, 500 men are professional soldiers, they will not engage in any production. One person needs 2 horses, that's 1,000 horses. Moreover, there is no war now, and we cannot support the war with war. Father, I cannot complete the order you gave me. There is no war now? But the Duke already knew from the witch that the war would break out soon. Of course, the Mountain very much wanted to have 500 cavalry, but at the moment it would overwhelm him. After all, he still needed to store gold dragons for a rainy day. The Mountain's first step was to train 100 cavalrymen to create a special force within the special forces. Before the transmigration, in Earth, if an ordinary soldier's salary was 2,000 a month, then the special forces would be 4,000, and the elite special forces would be 10,000. His goal was to create his own elite special team. First build 100 people, focus on doing high precision specialization. Once the war breaks out, reconnaissance, raids, maneuverability, close protection, 100 people is just right. If it is a battlefield breaking formation, these 100 people are the tip of the knife of the entire army, and he himself is the tip of the knife. It would certainly be better to support 500 such people, but that would be more than just an increase of 400 gold dragons in military pay each month. How much would the number of horses have to increase by 800, and how much would the fodder have to increase? How much would the grain, armor, weapons, cloaks, and marching tents have to increase? Although privately minting gold dragons, it has not yet formed a batch system of minting. Moreover, Lord Tywin took the lion's share. I must have you complete the task. What support do you want from me, tell me. Lord Tywin stared at the Mountain, increasing his tone. The Duke was determined to build an elite army to break through the formation, and this task could only be done by the Mountain. Once the war started, the Duke decided not to give the enemy a chance to breathe, and the West would strike his enemies head-on. Sir Kevin looked at Maester Botley. He hinted that the Maester should remind Lord Tywin that it was a time of peace and that he should not raise a monster like the Mountain. If the Mountain trained 500 such cavalry, his military strength would be no less than that of the 4 major families in the West. Once the Mountain's brutality and bloodlust get out of control, and he has strong troops in his hands, it will cause big trouble. If he kills a few nobles, it is very likely to lead to chaos in the West. However, Maester Botley did not respond to Sir Kevin's eyes. The Mountain was silent for a moment. He really wanted to expand his forces. Like Tywin, he knew that the outbreak of war was less than a year away, and there was not much time left for the people of the West to prepare. Because of his notoriety and enemies, he needed to strengthen his forces in the short term. Since the criminal act of privately minting gold dragons was in his hands, it was no problem to do a little trick. The Duke also knew how much it would cost to raise soldiers. Anyway, it was the Duke's order, so let's do it. Why pretend? Father, I need to choose the soldiers myself. Agreed. I want the prisoners in the dungeons of the major families in the West. If there are not enough people, priority should be given to serious criminals, criminals with mercenary backgrounds, and criminals proficient in swordsmanship, but my captains need to screen who we ultimately want. This time Lord Tywin didn't even say agreed, he just nodded. After screening, however many people there are, that's how many there will be, not limited to the number 500. Lord Tywin snorted. The Mountain admired Lord Tywin's political talent the most. Any decree that would take half a day to discuss in other dukes' courts would be issued by the Duke in the first moment. For example, improving shields and armor. As soon as he saw it and thought it was feasible, he immediately ordered the Maester to send out a raven to issue a military order to the entire territory, without the slightest hesitation or a heartbeat's worth of hesitation. In any of the Mountain's historical memories, there was no record of similar decisive figures. Lord Tywin's absolute strength, decisiveness, ruthlessness, and political talent for piercing the essence of problems were all rare. He was a born politician. However, no matter how powerful this politician was, he was limited by the shortcomings of the times. Compared with the Mountain, his overall view, civilization level, prediction of the future, and the direction and development of the world situation were already below the Mountain. In the Mountain's historical and cultural memory, there was Cao, a hero of the Three Kingdoms, who held the Emperor to command the princes. He himself borrowed a gourd to draw a dipper, imitating it in this world of ice and fire, using the witch to drive Tywin. Chapter 119. Duke Tywin was lingering in Clegane's village, as he had several places he wanted to see. Clegane's gold mine won from a bet. Golden Tooth, Master Topomot's noodle-making mechanical workshop in Clegane's smithy, the mountain land that Clegane had recruited vagrant paupers to set fire to and cultivate. Meanwhile, in Lannisport, not far from Clegane's lands, it was a sunny morning with excellent light. Earl Uthel was beaming with joy as he stood beneath the newly built Uthel Noodle House. A constant stream of people entered, the first group comprised entirely of his sworn vassals. The Earl's fiefdom was not limited to Lannisport, vast tracts of land outside the city also belonged to him. As the largest city in the Westerlands, boasting the largest population and the largest territory, it naturally had many lesser nobles and landed knights. These nobles and knights had all come to congratulate their lord on the opening of his noodle house. Grey-robed Scholar Bancroft and the Earl's Master-at-Arms and Captain of the Guard, Nar Lanette, were responsible for welcoming guests at the entrance. Earl Uthel, holding his daughter Rosamund Lannister's hand, accepted everyone's congratulations at the doorway. The second group consisted of wealthy merchants residing in Lannisport. As the largest port city in the Westerlands and the third largest in the entire kingdom, the city was home to many wealthy merchants. These tycoons engaged in extensive trade, both near with the Riverlands, the North, the Reach, and Old Town, and far with island nations west of the Sunset Sea, island nations in the far south with skin as dark as night, and the 9 free cities of Essos on the eastern continent. Even further afield, they engaged in trade with major cities in the east, dealing in goods such as fine wines and ivory. Their business covered all aspects of life, including fabrics, silks, porcelain, gold and silver, carvings, grains, spices, rouge and powders, and pets such as kittens and puppies. Everything imaginable. A port city with 1,000 years of history had no shortage of wealthy merchants with deep pockets. In an era when industry, agriculture, and commerce held little status, merchants, despite their wealth and significant contributions to social progress and prosperity, were still looked down upon by nobles if they lacked noble titles. Receiving an invitation from Earl Uthel was an unexpected honor for the wealthy merchants of Lannisport. Thus, all the large and small merchants settled in Lannisport attended. This was a golden opportunity to get close to Earl Uthel. Money was not omnipotent in this society, only the power in the hands of noble lords was. After the two groups were seated, the multi-story noodle house was already packed. People had not come to actually eat noodles, most had never even heard of them before. Those who had heard of them and were fortunate enough to have tasted them were only those lucky few who had encountered Clegane's men forcibly buying and selling noodles in the city for half a day. People came mainly because they wanted to curry favor with Earl Uthel. Earl Uthel was the city's great lord and the highest-ranking official in Lannisport. Whether they were knights or low-status merchants, everyone wanted to ingratiate themselves with Earl Uthel. The opening of Earl Uthel's noodle house, and their reception of an invitation from the Earl, was their honor. What the restaurant sold was irrelevant. If it sold stones, someone would buy a whole cartload to take home. The several-story restaurant was full, but there were still many people outside. The second batch of merchants had not all entered yet, and the third batch of captains, out-of-town bosses, and mercenary captains had not entered at all. Earl Uthel had set aside his true noble airs and was chatting outside with these merchants, out-of-town bosses, mercenary captains, and wandering knights who had not yet had a chance to enter. The Earl was full of confidence, determined to spread Earl Uthel's noodle house throughout the 7 kingdoms and win unparalleled fame for himself and his family. The Earl's graciousness excited everyone who had been invited despite not possessing a title. Many found it very difficult to even catch a glimpse of Earl Uthel usually, and some who had done business in Lannisport multiple times over the course of a decade had never had the opportunity to meet Earl Uthel in person. With the opening of the noodle house owned by Earl Uthel himself, he sent out invitations widely, including all the commoners in the city who were particularly skilled or famous in some way. Everyone surrounding Earl Uthel spoke only words of flattery and respect. In this civilization with its very rough and primitive dietary structure, the symbol of refined dietary civilization, noodles, made a grand debut. With a shout, a squad of mercenaries came from the street, with 4 people walking in front, 2 by 2, carrying a pair of 3-meter-long chopsticks. The middle of the chopsticks was painted red, and the ends were black. The paint was well done, gleaming brightly. One chopstick was as thick as a lance and 3 meters long, requiring 2 mercenaries to carry each pair. 3 meters was about the height of an ordinary house's first floor. The chopsticks had prominent family crests, a 3-dog design. Next to the 3-dog design was the family motto written in bright gold, unmatched. Behind the 4 soldiers carrying the chopsticks were 4 soldiers carrying 2 equally sized round, drum-shaped stone stools. The stone stools weighed over 100 pounds each and had 2 identical round holes in the middle, the purpose of which was unknown. Behind the 8 mercenaries carrying the items were dozens of fierce-looking mercenaries wearing decent armor. One of them had a particularly large head with a horrifying scar on his forehead. He wore a long sword at his waist and carried a huge bull-headed helmet. The bull-headed helmet was entirely black and very well crafted, gleaming brightly. This big-headed fellow was Kaiswick, famous in Lanny sport. He used to be the boss of all the hooligans in the east, south, and north of the city. Later, he formed the Warblade Mercenary Company, transforming himself into the commander of the Warblade Company. Those closely surrounding him were all the leaders of the hooligans who had risen up with him from the streets. The team consisted of about 50 people in total, with the tall banner in the center, the roaring 3-dog banner of House Clegane. Underneath the large banner was a small banner, the Warblade Company's flag, a blood-dripping kitchen knife on a black background. The hoodlums who rose from the bottom could not afford good swords, and kitchen knives were essential weapons that everyone used. Many people lined the streets to watch the spectacle, and residents of the houses watched the somewhat unsettling procession from their windows and doorways. The 2 pairs of giant chopsticks carried by the 4 soldiers attracted people's attention. Because Duke Tywin had ordered wood instead of iron, every household had to replace all iron pots, iron plates, cutlery, iron crafts, knives, forks, and even spoons with wooden ones within 6 months. Chopsticks, as people's eating utensils, had entered people's lives. Although people did not fully use chopsticks yet, they were no longer unfamiliar with them. Especially the families of knights and lords, because they wanted to set an example of reform, those with status, position, and money were the first to learn to use chopsticks. But it was the first time people had seen 3-meter-long chopsticks. Could chopsticks actually be made so long? This also made it difficult for everyone to believe. Earl Uthel's Noodle House opening naturally included an invitation to the mountain, but because Duke Tywin was at the mountain's village of Clegane, the mountain sent Kaiswick, the big-headed fellow in Lanny sport, to deliver the gift in his place. There was another reason the mountain did not come: his reputation was terrible, and he did not want to scare the guests. Earl Uthel stood still. As an earl, he did not need to give Kaiswick face. The earl did not welcome Kaiswick and his men. They looked unkind, fierce, and murderous, and the 20 or so men around Kaiswick were all death row inmates he had recently released. Captain of the Guard Narlanet quickly stepped forward to greet Kaiswick and his men. Kaiswick raised his hand, and the brothers behind him stopped together, appearing truly well trained. Seeing these bandit-like fellows stop, Earl Uthel breathed a sigh of relief. He was opening this noodle shop to make money, and it was best if these bandit soldiers did not come to harass him. Kaiswick and Stinkmouth, leading 8 soldiers carrying stone stools and giant chopsticks, came forward, and people made way. The 2 drum-shaped stone stools were placed on the left and right sides of the noodle house's gate, and the 2 3-meter-long giant chopsticks were inserted into the 2 round holes in the middle of the stone stools, fitting perfectly. As soon as they were placed, people applauded and cheered. Such giant chopsticks as a facade were truly amazing. Earl Uthel himself was both surprised and delighted. Earl Uthel, the stone stools and chopsticks are a gift from Lord Mountain to celebrate the opening of your noodle house, Kaiswick said. He unceremoniously referred to his lord by his vulgar name. Thank you, Sir Gregor. Earl Uthel said with a smile. Earl, there is also a pair of chopsticks here, a gift from Lady Jane to the Earl, Kaiswick gestured, and Stinkmouth took out a beautifully packaged box. Opening it, Stinkmouth took out a pair of chopsticks and said, Earl, these are the golden jade fortune chopsticks. The front end of the chopsticks is green jade, the middle is gold, and the tail end is also jade. The chopsticks are also engraved with your name and family crest, symbolizing that your noodle house business will be prosperous and full of gold and jade. That chopsticks could be made into such elegant objects with such auspicious meanings was something that all the onlookers and Earl Uthel himself had never imagined. It turned out that chopsticks could not only be made 3 meters long as a signboard decoration, but also be made of gold and jade. They were not only tableware but also works of art. These golden jade fortune chopsticks were exquisitely crafted, polished smooth and bright, shining brightly in the sunlight. The gold and green complemented each other, elegant and perfect. The jade and gold materials were noble and refined. Engraved with Earl Uthel's name and family crest, they immediately became a treasure that could be passed down through generations. The exquisite inlaying technique and exquisite workmanship were all amazing and admirable. Among the onlookers were many extremely wealthy merchants, and upon seeing such exquisite and noble chopsticks, they all felt their eyes open. Their limited thinking that chopsticks were merely small tableware for daily life was suddenly broadened. Compared to the things they had sent, these golden jade fortune chopsticks were ingenious, showed great craftsmanship, and were unique among all the gifts. Kaiswick, having delivered the gifts on behalf of the mountain couple, was about to politely take his leave when, on the third floor, filled with nobles and knights, bowls of steaming noodles were brought to the tables like flowing water. Next to each bowl of noodles was a bowl of specially made noodle broth. The aroma of the vegetables in the specially made broth, separated from the noodles, immediately filled the floor. Chapter 120. The jazz knights crowding the windows on the third floor facing the street were all drawn to the noodles. They had never seen such refined noodles. Not only had they never seen them, but they had never even heard of them. The Westerling noodles caused a stir as soon as they were served. These were all wealthy people who had eaten noodles and could afford to eat noodles. But these noodles, all the same size and so delicate, were unlike anything they had ever seen. The noodles they had eaten before were of different sizes and lengths, mostly in clumps, and some were as thick as palms. Their most distinctive features were their coarseness and primitiveness. Moreover, no matter what noble was eating them, the noodles were always served with soup. Things are valued for their rarity. These noodles, which no one had ever seen, heard of, or tasted before, dispelled the purely complimentary intentions of the guests as soon as they were served in the Earl's establishment. No one could resist the allure of these exquisite and aesthetically pleasing noodles. As the noodles were brought to the tables on the second and first floors, the guests on the third floor had already finished their noodles. When the guests asked for a second bowl, they were told that because the production of noodles was not easy and the fine grinding of wheat was time-consuming and laborious, the production quantity of noodles was not high. 1 bowl per person today was already the best they could do, and no knight could have a second bowl. If they wanted to eat more, they would have to come back tomorrow. This was the true high-end manifestation of refined food culture. Being able to eat a bowl and having the prestige to come to the Earl's noodle shop was already a rare honor in itself. Not every knight or wealthy celebrity was qualified to taste noodles here. There were many people who could come up with a silver stag, but those who were qualified to enter the Earl's noodle shop, in addition to the silver stag, were either noble, wealthy, or celebrities who had made outstanding contributions in some field. As for others, they would not be received even if they came with money. If these knights and lords had eaten delicacies they had never seen or tasted before in other restaurants, they would have certainly eaten their fill and enjoyed themselves to the fullest. But in Earl Ode's noodle shop, no one dared to be presumptuous. If they wanted to eat the unique noodles again, there was no other way but to come again tomorrow. If they wanted to spend money to buy these noodles and cook them at home, regardless of whether Clegane village could produce a large quantity of refined noodles, they would not be sold. An hour later, the guests left. Earl Ode saw the guests off and returned to the store to watch the shop assistants count the income. Today was a great harvest, because in addition to the noodle money of 1 silver stag per person, many people had also given generous gifts. Some super rich people gave congratulatory gifts of 100 gold dragons each. After counting the accounts for half an hour, Earl Odes and Sir Gregor each received hundreds of gold dragons. The Earl's eyes narrowed with laughter, and the little girl Rosamond Lannister was also running up and down the noodle shop, jumping and bouncing. The chefs, helpers, apprentices, and servants who came from Clegane village, including the original hotel owner, were all beaming with joy. Because after the accounts were cleared, everyone cleaned up and could close the door to rest. And the time was just noon, and the noodle shop was closed for the day. The unit price of a bowl of noodles was high, and they were only sold to nobles and wealthy people. The food also sold a sense of sophistication, a level of superiority. Not only were they eating unique gourmet noodles, but they were also strongly satisfying the vanity of the guests. And the profit was several times higher than selling vegetables and wine in the past. The chefs and workers were happy because the working hours were greatly shortened, and Earl Odes was even happier because he was sure that many nobles would bring their families to eat these noodles tomorrow. This unique noodle delicacy not only broadened the knowledge of the nobles and the wealthy, but also became a bragging point for them when they went out to socialize. Anyone who had not eaten it would be looked down upon. The noodle sales tomorrow, 1 bowl per person, would inevitably increase by more than double. Before long, the reputation of Earl Ode's noodle shop in Lannisport would spread out and travel along the trade routes to many island nations in the Great Sea, and to the 9 free trade city-states across the narrow sea. A month later, they could start selling a small amount of noodles at high prices through trade routes, slowly gaining a greater reputation step by step. 2 months later, they could open a second noodle shop in King's Landing. A different kind of flowing gold mine would be born from this. Master Alex. Earl Oates said with a smile. Yes, my lord. Alex was the wife of Blackstone, the banner-bearer of the Mountain's cavalry, and the master chef sent by the Mountain to Earl Oates' noodle shop. I will send Nar Lannister, the head of the family guards, to escort you back to the new Clegane village. There is plenty of time, and you can return at your leisure before evening without delaying tomorrow's noodle business. Yes, my lord. Please go back and tell Lord Gregor, but it is best to tell Lady Jane, that our harvest today is very good. The income of several hundred gold dragons belonging to Sir Gregor will temporarily be kept by me in violation of the agreement and will not be sent to Clegane Keep today. I will send the money to Sir Gregor's hands immediately after Duke Tywin leaves Clegane village. Yes, my lord. Please tell Lady Jane privately that if Duke Tywin knows that our noodle shop is very profitable, I am afraid he will increase our taxes. The Duke has always liked to do this. Our noodle shop is very profitable, but it is just starting, and it is appropriate to keep a low profile as much as possible. Yes, my lord. Earl Oates hoped to keep a low profile and make a fortune quietly, but his little calculations confirmed what Duke Tywin said when criticizing Sir Kevin. Kevin and Oates are both smart and intelligent, loyal and responsible, but they have a low vision, a narrow mind, and a small pattern. Chapter 121. Count Odber was right on the mark. Guards Captain Gna Lanny escorted Master Alec back to Cregane village. As expected, Sir Gregor was accompanying Duke Tywin at the Gold Leaf Bay mining site. This was good. When Alec found Lady Jane in the chapel, she was only accompanied by the witch. Alec kept Count Odber's warning firmly in mind, keep a low profile and don't publicize the noodle shop's booming business, lest the Duke increase taxes. Therefore, at Alec's humble request, Lady Jane met with Alec alone in her room. Alec was very excited because today, in just half a day, the Lord and Lady had made over 400 gold dragons. This was a great fortune, and Alec was happy for the Lord. Since Lord Gregor returned to Cregane, his kindness to his subjects didn't need singers to spread the word or scholars to praise him. The people had their own measure in their hearts. What the Lord did, what he gave, what he gained, what he promoted, and what he taught everyone, the people knew everything clearly. Sir Gregor had done a lot for his people, and he only did it, he didn't talk about it. He never uttered a word of self-praise. He was still as ferocious as ever, but the people were no longer afraid of him, and gradually developed gratitude and respect for him. No matter how fierce he was, even if his subjects made mistakes, no one would be severely punished anymore. On the contrary, if any of his subjects encountered any troubles, whether it was difficulties in their lives or humiliation by nobles and knights from neighboring territories, within a day, Julie Cregane, the Cregane squad leader, would definitely bring Cregane cavalry to seek justice. No matter what the other party's title was, they had to apologize and compensate. Otherwise, Sir Gregor would personally come to their door. This filled the hearts of the people, who had never received the Lord's protection before, with gratitude. In a short period of time, no one in the neighboring territories, whether they were noble sirs, knights, or ordinary people, dared to bully the people of Cregane village anymore. Alec used to be very afraid of Sir Gregor, but now he respected Sir Gregor very much. Everything seemed so natural. Gregor only acted and didn't speak, and the effect was quick and significant. When you silently keep doing things, it's like flowing water. Where water flows, a channel is naturally formed. Alec repeated Count Odber's words to Lady Jane. Lady Jane was also very happy. Alec said that the reputation of the noodles would soon spread throughout the city, and there would only be more and more customers. Lady Jane praised Alec's hard work and rewarded Alec with a copper star, which made Alec even happier. Knock. Knock. Someone knocked on Lady Jane's door. The knock was hesitant and timid. The sound was also very soft. Alec opened the door, and a little boy in a scholar's apprentice robe was standing at the door. His name was Andy Shalott, his mother was Ellen, the steward in charge of kitchen affairs, and his father was Ellen Shalott, who was poisoned by the strangler. Andy, come in, Lady Jane smiled. Her smile was kind and beautiful, and the little boy's timidity was obviously relieved. The little boy came in, holding a small scroll sealed with wax in his hand. Where did the letter come from? Casterly Rock. The little boy said in a low voice. The little boy had delicate features and was 7 years old this year. He was introverted and timid, but he had a good memory, was smart and eager to learn, and was perfect as an apprentice to Scholar Haleen. Casterly Rock was Lady Jane's maiden home. Sir Gregor took Scholar Haleen to accompany Duke Tywin to Gold Leaf Bay to see the gold mining situation, so the scholar's room was left to the 7-year-old apprentice Andy to take care of. The ravens in the scholar's room were naturally all managed by Andy. "Okay, I understand, you can go," Lady Jane said softly. "Yes, madam." The little boy bowed, took 2 steps backward first, and then turned and left. Alec said, "Madam, I have to hurry back to Lanny Sport, I must leave too." "Okay, go." Lady Jane nodded with a smile. Alec bowed deeply, then walked out of the room, gently and respectfully closing the door for the lady. Jane broke the wax seal and opened the scroll. It was a letter from her father, Gavin Westerling, who had returned to Casterly Rock. Her father asked when Jane and Sir Gregor would return to Casterly Rock to hold the family wedding. At the end of the letter, her father said that Earl Damon Marbrand of Ashmark and his son Adam Marbrand had returned to Ashmark and had united all the nobles in the north. They would not return the land that had been purchased and seized to the Westerling family. More than 20 large and small nobles in the north had all united and would not yield to Sir Gregor. If Sir Gregor dared to rely on his strength, they would not be afraid to start a war. Jane was silent after reading the letter. She knew that the other 20 or so nobles in the north were not to be feared. These people did not dare to openly oppose Sir Gregor, but with the Marbrand family as their support, that was not certain. If the Marbrand family coerced and lured the other nobles, then it was entirely possible for all the northern nobles to unite. It was absolutely impossible for Gregor to conquer all the northern nobles by force. The combined forces of the other party exceeded the combined forces of the Criggan and Westerling families by dozens of times. Now was a time of peace. Duke Tywin never intervened in small frictions between nobles. Killing a few guards around a night was also a small matter, but the Duke would never allow a large-scale civil war among the nobles. Sir Gregor was very tough. He had used his great sword to kill 4 knights of the Marbrand family on the 10-mile official road outside Casterly Rock in order to establish his power. As it turned out, that action not only did not scare the Marbrand family, but made them even tougher. Earl Marbrand had calculated that there was nothing Gregor could do to him. He returned to Ashmark. A river flowing down from the mountains passed outside Ashmark, forming a natural moat. This river was the source of the Tumblestone, and the Tumblestone's lower reaches was the Red Fork of the Riverlands. In addition to the natural moat, the walls of Ashmark were high and thick, and the garrison was sufficient. The regular garrison was over 1,000 men, and in the event of war, it could quickly gather 3,000 men. Together with the forces of more than 20 other large and small nobles in the north, it was not difficult to gather tens of thousands of troops. Jane thought about it and felt that the matter was very. Gregor had already made the statement, and if he failed to recover the Westerling family's land this time, the Westerling family's reputation and Gregor's honor would plummet. Gregor would naturally never give in, but the last act of killing and intimidation was not successful. The Marbrand family still firmly chose not to yield in the face of Gregor. Duke Tywin's mother's maiden name was Marbrand, and she was Earl Damon Marbrand's aunt. In terms of blood relations, in the Duke's heart, Jane, this adopted daughter, could not compare to the Marbrand family at all. A day later, Sir Gregor and Duke Tywin returned from Gold Leaf Bay together. Duke Tywin would leave Criggan village the next day to return to Casterly Rock. That night, Lady Jane lay on Gregor's body and read Earl Gavin's letter to Sir Gregor. After listening, Gregor was silent for a long time, and said, "Tomorrow, I will have Sweetmouth Ralph escort you back to Casterly Rock with the family cavalry. Let Mom and Dad prepare our wedding for us first. 10 days later, I will come to Casterly Rock to complete the family wedding with you." 10 days later. Lady Jane's eyes were sweet, her gaze like golden honey. "Where are you going in these 10 days? What are you going to do?" "I'm going to get a big gift for my father-in-law and mother-in-law. Our land." Jane was intelligent. "The land that belongs to us, even if the world turns upside down, I must take it back, I will never give in. But we don't have any troops at all. Ashmark is too high and the walls are too thick. To deal with a tortoise, you only need an iron hammer," Gregor said lightly. Jane wanted to say something, but Gregor reached out and supported her soft body. After a round of intimate weakness against strength, Gregor entered. Jane's breathing was disordered, and she hummed quickly. Chapter 123. The next morning, Gregor sent Duke Tywin back to Casterly Rock. Accompanying the Duke were Lady Jane Westerling, Sweetmouth Rafford Clegane, and dozens of horsemen from Clegane's Hold. After passing Casterly Rock, Lady Jane and her party took the official road north to the crag to prepare for the Clegane family's internal wedding in 10 days. Sir Gregor was left with only 3 people, the headsman Duncan Clegane, his loyal fan Polliver Clegane, and his adopted daughter Jory Clegane. Before Duke Tywin departed, Maester Hallis released a raven early in the morning, sending a message to Kyswick the big man in Lanny Sport, ordering him to lead his bravest and most fearless brothers back to Clegane's Hold, as the mountain had important matters for Kyswick to attend to. Clegane's Hold was very close to Lanny Sport, with their territories bordering each other. Kyswick, who was busy in Lanny Sport subduing old subordinates and annexing newly emerging gangs and small mercenary groups, quickly received the raven. He couldn't read a word, but naturally, there were brothers who could read the letter for him. Kyswick was overjoyed after hearing the letter. Since pledging allegiance to the mountain, he hadn't had any outstanding performance. He hadn't yet gathered information about the former members of the warband who had become pirates in the Sunset Sea, so he hadn't gone out to sea to recruit them. Now a good opportunity had come. The mountain had suddenly sent a letter, asking him to take his most capable and boldest brothers back to do great things. Chiswick's toes instantly filled with energy, and he was like a balloon filled with air. He immediately carefully selected 17 people, making a total of 18 riders, and rushed back to Clegane's Hold at full speed. After lunch, Gregor and his party, totaling 23 riders, with 1 spare horse per person, and Sir Gregor with 2 spare horses, took the old horse soldier Thomas Mann, entrusted Clegane's Hold to the joint management of the Witch, Lady Alyn and Master Tothmot, and then Sir Gregor confidently led the 22 out of Clegane's Hold. Gregor and his party took a shortcut along a small road, heading straight north, bypassing Casterly Rock, and after a short half-hour of rapid march, they reached the River Road. The River Road was the only official road connecting the Westerlands and the Riverlands to the east. After entering the mountains, this official road had a famous checkpoint on the border of the Westerlands, which was also the only border city of the Westerlands to the east, the Golden Tooth. Sir Gregor's first target was to go to the Golden Tooth. The Golden Tooth and the Marbrand family's Ashmark to the north were completely different places, not even in the same general direction. What was the mystery? Although everyone didn't understand, no one dared to ask the mountain. They just mustered their strength and hurried forward. Before setting off, all 22 people knew that the mountain was going to make trouble for the Marbrand family of Ashmark, because Lord Damon and his heir Sir Adam had dared to gather all the major and minor nobles in the north to form an alliance, occupying the Westerling family's land and refusing to return it, and claiming that they were not afraid of war. Since you want war, then war it is. Although the mountain didn't say anything after receiving the news, he was already furious in his heart. If he didn't deal with the Marbrand family, he wouldn't be the mountain. But with just the 22 people around him? And one of them was a little girl, Jory Clegane, and another was an old horse soldier, Thomas Mann. Before setting off, Kyswick and the headsman Duncan, 2 absolutely fearless and brave generals, raised questions. The mountain only glanced at them and said, "If you're afraid, stay behind." This made Chiswick's face turn red and made the headsman Duncan feel ashamed. Being so despised by the mountain made the 2 absolute tough guys taste what shame was. Duncan was fine, as he had been with the mountain for a long time. Kyswick was a newcomer to the mountain. The mountain valued him and specially summoned him back to give him a chance to make a contribution. Before the team had even set off, the mountain told him to stay behind if he was afraid. These words made Kyswick the big man's black face turn red. He finally realized that the mountain was the mountain. The heroic deeds he, Kyswick, had done in the past, such as conquering the East City, South City and North City gangs, were all insignificant in the mountain's eyes. The mountain, who dared to challenge the alliance of more than 20 northern noble families with 22 subordinates, was a well-deserved great hero. This courage alone made a tough guy like Kyswick instantly submit, making Kyswick and his death squad completely convinced and prostrate themselves in admiration. Therefore, no one had any objections anymore. Everyone kept their questions in their hearts, mustered their strength, and followed the mountain out of Clegane's Hold with a whoosh. In just over half a day, not long after dark, the mountain and his party arrived at the Golden Tooth, hundreds of miles away. Although it was hundreds of miles, the river road was an official road, flat and wide, and very easy to travel. In addition, the mountain didn't stop along the way, changing horses when they were tired, eating bread on horseback when they were hungry, and drinking wine when they were thirsty, so in just over half a day, the party arrived at the famous Golden Tooth, covered in dust. The Mountain shouted at the drawbridge to open the gate. The centurion guarding the city was shocked to hear the Mountain's voice and immediately flew to report to Count Leo Laford, the city lord. Count Leo was also shocked. What was the Mountain, this great demon, doing suddenly coming to the Golden Tooth? He dared not neglect and immediately quickly mounted his horse to greet him. The drawbridge slowly lowered under the illumination of countless torches. The Mountain and his party entered the city, and Count Leo Laford came up to greet them. On the drawbridge, the Mountain said, "Count, quickly prepare food, good wine, and hot water. We're starving. Let's eat our fill first, and then we'll have important matters to discuss with you." The headsman Dunson, the adopted daughter Jory, the old horse soldier Thomas Mann, Kyswick the big man, and Arthur the foul mouth and others all breathed a sigh of relief. It turned out that the Mountain was rough but meticulous, and had long thought of coming to the Golden Tooth to ask Count Leo for reinforcements. All 22 people secretly breathed a sigh of relief. Among the 4 major families in the Westerlands was the Leford family. When it came to the strength of troops and the power of political status, the Leford family was even stronger than the Marbrand family of Ashmark. The Mountain was respectfully welcomed in by Count Leo. After a hearty meal and a comfortable hot bath, the Mountain came out and said, "Count Leo, I'm holding a family wedding at the crag in 3 days. Today, I've made a special detour, from the far west to the far east, to specially invite you to attend my wedding." Leo suddenly understood and laughed. "Since Sir Gregor has specially come to sincerely invite me, Leo will definitely come to congratulate you. Sir Gregor, we'll set off tomorrow morning." "No, Count, time is too tight. I'm leaving tonight," Gregor said. Count Leo laughed. "Sir Gregor is really joking." "I'm not joking at all," the Mountain said seriously. "Sir, you don't need to bring your guards. We are your guards. I swear by my family honor and the name of the 7 gods that the Cleganes will protect your safety. Count, please change your clothes. Dunson, Kyswick, what are you waiting for? All of you, get dressed and ready to go." To go from the easternmost Golden Tooth in the Westerlands to the northwesternmost crag on the coast, one had to pass through a large city, an unavoidable route, Ashmark, the Marbrand family's seat. The Mountain would lead 22 men to break through the high walls and thick defences of Ashmark tomorrow night. Chapter 124. Count Leo could hardly believe it. It was as if in the blink of an eye, the Mountain's men were fully dressed, and outside, it was a slightly starry summer night. The Mountain said, "Count, change your clothes, we'll wait for you." Leo forced a smile, saying awkwardly, "All right, I'll set off right away and go with you." "But, sir, from Golden Tooth to Crack Claw Point, it's all mountain roads, very unsafe at night with wolves, shadow cats and hunters' traps. The mountains are high and the roads are slippery, and the roads aren't official roads, very difficult to travel. We will light the torches for illumination. Summer nights are cool, perfect for traveling. There are indeed many wild beasts in the mountains, but beasts fear fire. If the Count is still worried, then I will stay by your side at all times." The Mountain's earnest expression made Leo feel like he was in a ridiculous dream. "Sir, why must we leave tonight? I haven't even had time to prepare a congratulatory gift for you." Leo sought another excuse. "Count, your presence is the greatest gift," the Mountain said, neither humble nor arrogant, without letting up. Count Leo was helpless. He didn't want the Mountain to draw his sword in his room. The people around the Mountain were all full of murderous intent, with fierce faces. "All right, sir, I'll accompany you on a trip through the mountains tonight." "Wait a moment, I'll go change my clothes." The Count stood up and walked towards the inner room. The Mountain tilted his head, and Kyswick the Griathiad, Loyalist Polliver and Executioner Dunson immediately followed closely behind the Count. The Count felt his head instantly double in size. He knew that with the Mountain's temper, if he didn't comply, it would inevitably cause a great deal of unpleasantness. Although the Mountain wouldn't dare to do anything to his life in the end, he couldn't do anything to the Mountain either. He was one of Duke Tywin's 4 important ministers, while the Mountain was Duke Tywin's tool of a son-in-law, the great god of slaughter in the west, having been by Tywin's side for 20 years. Recently, he had become even more popular with Duke Tywin due to a series of inventions. Since the Mountain was sincerely inviting him to attend the wedding, then so be it. There was no need to make an enemy of such a savage character as the Mountain over a joyous event. Half an hour later, the drawbridge of Golden Tooth slowly lowered. The mountain took the lead, Count Leo was in the middle, and the Clegane men guarded the Count in the middle of the group, as they embarked on a mountain road leading to the northwest. Although it was a mountain road, the roads in the Westerlands were well built due to the abundance of mountains and gold mines. 23 torches were lit, like stars in the night, advancing rapidly on the mountain road with very low visibility. The terrain of the Westerlands was high in the east and low in the west. The east was a continuous stretch of high mountains and ridges, and places without roads were very difficult to travel. Not a few mules, horses, and wild boars died from falls. But as long as there was a road, the quality of the road was very well constructed. They traveled quickly all night, until dawn, when the group emerged from the mountains, and in front of them was a gently rolling hilly area. This indicated that they had entered the territory of House Marbrand. As long as they crossed the Tumblestone River in front of them, Crack Claw Point, the seat of House Marbrand, was about 100 miles away. Count Leo, having marched all night, was already exhausted. He said, "Sire, after crossing the Tumblestone River, Crack Claw Point is not far ahead. Let's make a final push. We can enter Crack Claw Point in a little over an hour to rest, eat something, and take a break before continuing." The mountain said, "Count, let's not cross the river yet, let's find a place to rest properly first." He spurred his horse into a side road, entering a primeval forest. Before Count Leo could understand what was happening, he was surrounded by 22 Clegane men and rushed into the side road, entering a primeval forest. The mountains group went deep into the dense forest, and finally found a place sheltered from the wind and with water. Everyone dismounted, fed the horses, spread carpets, and set up tents. Several archers went out to hunt, and soon killed several rabbits, a deer, and several small animals such as weasels and foxes. Everyone gutted the prey and quickly strung them on branches. Soon, the aroma of meat wafted through the air. The mountain took out snow salt from his personal food bag and sprinkled it evenly on the roasted meat. Everyone continued to barbecue until golden oil sizzled out and dripped onto the fire. The aroma of the barbecue after adding snow salt was even stronger, and everyone kept swallowing their saliva. Cloaks had already been spread out on the ground, and food such as bread, honey, seasoning packets, cooked dried meat, fruit wine, and various fruits were taken out and filled the large cloaks on the ground. Everyone sat on the ground, wrapped the fresh barbecue in oilcloth, and ate their fill. Count Leo also put aside the small thoughts in his heart and stopped thinking about the mountain's strange behavior. Since he was here to congratulate the mountain on his wedding, he would just go along with his temperament. He thought it through, his mood relaxed, he ate meat in large mouthfuls and drank wine in large bowls. After being full of wine and food, he crawled into the tent, fell asleep, and slept soundly and comfortably. He woke up full of energy, truly the first good sleep in many years. The Count crawled out of the tent. The other tents around him had already been packed up, and everyone was organizing their things. Looking at the sunlight outside the forest, it was already setting in the west. He had slept for almost a whole day. A short while later, everyone mounted their horses and the group set off again, leaving the forest and heading towards the Tumblestone River. Fishing boats were already waiting here. The Count then realized that while he was sleeping, the mountain had already sent someone to find the ferry. The group crossed the river, and the road ahead was even easier to travel, with no more high mountains and ridges, just a hilly area. The sun was setting, and the sky was getting late. The mountain had a large appetite, and he gnawed on dried meat and bread and drank fruit wine on horseback. Everyone was eating on horseback, and it seemed like they might be traveling all night again. If so, they could reach Casterly Rock by dawn. Count Leo rode his horse to the mountain's side. "Sire, Crack Claw Point, the seat of House Marbrand, is not far ahead. I have a good relationship with Lord Damon. If we pass by Crack Claw Point without going in, it won't look good on my face if he finds out." The mountain pondered for a moment, then said, "Count Leo, then let's go a little slower, and stay in Crack Claw Point tonight. We can also invite Lord Damon to attend my wedding. That would be best." Count Leo was overjoyed. A little over an hour later, at midnight, the group arrived at the foot of Crack Claw Point. The mountain dismounted, not much shorter than the others on horseback. Count Leo, who had a good relationship with Lord Damon, rode forward and shouted to open the gate. The captain of the garrison on the city recognized Count Leo's voice. The city gate opened wide, and the drawbridge lowered with a rumble. At the same time, soldiers ran into the Lord's castle to inform Lord Damon of Count Leo's late-night visit. Upon hearing this, Lord Damon, in order to fulfill the etiquette of a host, hurriedly came out to greet him. Outside, Count Leo was about to go up the drawbridge and enter the city when a hand grabbed his horse's rein. "Count, wait a moment, let the Lord come out to greet us." The one who grabbed the rein was none other than the Mountain. The Mountain and the Count were in the middle, surrounded by 22 Clegane men on their left and right. The torches in the Clegane men's hands were also extinguished one by one. Count Leo felt surprised, but he couldn't forcefully insist on going in first. He said, "All right, sire, we'll wait for Lord Damon to come out to greet us." Count Leo wasn't a bad person at heart. He thought that the Mountain wanted to show off, just like he had welcomed the Mountain into Golden Tooth. The Mountain, being such a strong and domineering person, held himself in high regard, and if he had such a request, then he would satisfy his vanity. Lord Damon led a group of people out on horseback. As soon as he stepped onto the drawbridge, he saw the tall and burly figure of the Mountain at the head of the drawbridge. Although the Mountain had dismounted as a disguise, his size was simply too huge. Lord Damon felt a sense of foreboding and immediately turned his horse around. In the blink of an eye, the Mountain's great sword was already unsheathed, and with a loud roar, his voice like thunder, his momentum like a galloping horse, he took the lead and rushed onto the drawbridge, heading straight for Lord Damon. Chapter 125. Marked Rock City was tall and heavily fortified, like a giant iron-clad turtle. Earl Leo of Gold Tooth City was the great iron hammer that the Mountain had found to smash open the turtle's iron shell. Even if Earl Leo sensed something amiss along the way and refused to cooperate with the Mountain, he wouldn't have a choice. That's right, the Mountain would definitely force Earl Leo to shout open the gates of Marked Rock City. They rested at the source of the Tumblestone River to arrive here at night. Under the cover of darkness, the Mountain could better conceal his massive size. Even if Earl Leo hadn't suggested entering Marked Rock City to rest and avoid meeting Earl Damon, the Mountain would have forced him to do so. Earl Leo stared in disbelief as the Mountain swung his great sword straight at Earl Damon. By the time he reacted, the 22 riders of Clegane, like a whirlwind sweeping away fallen leaves, had already charged across the drawbridge and into Marked Rock City. Only 22 riders, but under the Mountain's leadership, they exuded the momentum of 220, 2,200, 22,000 men. Their momentum was unstoppable. The Mountain charged in like a galloping horse, scaring Earl Damon out of his wits, nearly causing him to fall from his horse. The guards around the Earl were completely unprepared. Upon seeing the Mountain appear, their voices boomed like thunder, and each of them trembled with fear. Several war horses were startled and bolted, throwing the formation into immediate disarray. By the time the Mountain, like a ferocious beast, arrived before Earl Damon, and his horse were still spinning in circles. The chaotic effect on the formation was very effective. Several guards, knowing they were no match for the Mountain, still risked their lives to try and block him. One had just drawn his longsword, his warhorse just charging towards the Mountain, when with a whoosh, a small arrow struck him in the throat, and he fell over. With one swing of his sword, the Mountain cleaved the startled, charging warhorse in two. The sound of arrows whizzing past was constant. Black arrows shot past with a sound, and 3 knights cried out in agony, one by one falling from their horses, dead on the ground. His foster daughter, Julie Clegane's short crossbow was truly a perfect weapon for close-quarters night attacks. Earl Damon was terrified. He finally turned his horse around. In reality, it didn't take long, only a few breaths, but to him, it felt like a century had passed. After the initial chaos, the guards around him, each with the resolve to die, came to intercept the humanoid beast charging out from the primordial wilderness, the Mountain. The Mountain swung his great sword wildly. The length of the sword plus the length of his arm gave him an attack range of over 3 meters. The heavy two-handed sword was like a small knife in his hands, wielded at will. The sword light flashed like lightning, showing no mercy, unstoppable, instantly cutting down 5 men in a row. 2 startled horses charged towards the drawbridge, but the Mountain punched and kicked them off the bridge, smashing them into the moat, creating huge splashes. The dozens of garrison soldiers on the city wall watched in stunned silence, their bodies stiff, as if someone had cast a dark magic spell on them, making them unable to move their feet. This scene unfolded suddenly and unexpectedly. Most of the soldiers on the city wall had just woken up from their dreams and were caught off guard by the sudden change. After all, there had been no war for 16 years of peace. Who would seriously guard the city? Not a single soldier watching the gate of Marked Rock City had the mentality or psychological preparation for wartime. The Mountain killed, one with each swing, two with one swing, wildly hacking and slashing. Earl Damon was so frightened that his hands trembled and his body went limp. He no longer cared about anyone or anything. He spurred his horse into a frantic gallop, but suddenly felt like he had been struck in the back of the heart by a heavy hammer. Everything went black, and he felt a great force lifting him into the air. The feeling of weightlessness filled him with extreme fear, and the ground grew farther and farther away, as the cold night wind filled his mouth, eyes, and nose. The threat of death was so real, so close. Could it be that the mountain really dared to kill me? How could this be? If I had known that the mountain really dared to kill people, I would never have insisted on taking those few pieces of land from Westerling. But there was no regret medicine in the world. Earl Damon was so frightened by his regret that he fainted. He fainted before he even fell from the air. Medically speaking, under extreme fear, the body automatically activates a self-protection mechanism, fainting. Fainting is a type of false death. Boom! Earl Damon fell to the ground, crashing heavily onto the street. Fortunately, he had first feigned death in the air, so when he landed, he felt no pain, which saved him from suffering. Earl Leo, standing before the moat's drawbridge, remained motionless in the night. The scene he had just witnessed was deeply etched in his mind. A group of Clegane men, like wolves and tigers, had rushed across the drawbridge, raising their swords, bows and crossbows, and cutting down the Earl's dozen guards and the city's soldiers like chopping melons and vegetables. Some soldiers hadn't even drawn their swords before they were shot through the throat by bows and crossbows. More knights and soldiers were forced to fight without helmets and armor, and were hacked and slashed by Drennan, Polliver and Kyswick the Great, blood and severed limbs flying, screams echoing with the river. It was a horrific scene of slaughter. Earl Leo had heard the sound of knives cutting through bones many times. That teeth-grinding, stomach-churning sound was truly unique compared to other sounds. These people were too ruthless. Every strike seemed to be aimed at an enemy with a blood feud. Seeing that the Earl was about to escape on horseback, the mountain grabbed Kyswick the Great, who was nearby hacking at people, and threw him out with a roar. Kyswick, like a compressed spring, flew through the air and knocked the Earl off his horse. The mountain was ruthless to the people of Marked Rock City, but he was also so ruthless to his own people, acting so violently. Looking at these people, they were no different from bandits who were slaughtering a city. Could it be that the mountain really wanted to kill Earl Damon? Earl Damon was Tywin Lannister's cousin. Half of Tywin Lannister's blood was from Earl Damon's family. Earl Leo couldn't believe it. His eyes were bulging with pain, as if he had been frozen by dark magic and couldn't blink. Woo-woo! A soldier on the city wall blew the horn of alarm. Then, from the city center, the north, west, and east of the city, the horns of alarm sounded. Throughout the city, countless dogs barked, and all kinds of noises suddenly erupted loudly. Marked Rock City usually had more than 1,000 garrison soldiers. Once the horn of alarm was sounded, they could quickly assemble 3,000 soldiers. Earl Leo listened to the countless chaotic sounds gathering in the city. He found that he couldn't think, couldn't move, and was cold all over. Kyswick the Great rolled over and got up from the ground. The mountain had already rushed in front of him. "Are you okay?" "I'm fine." Kyswick grinned, his face and body covered in splattered blood, making him look like a demon from hell. The mountain, like a god, swept past Kyswick and stepped forward to pick up the fainted Earl Damon. "Anyone injured? Speak up!" the mountain said in a deep voice. No one answered. Maybe someone was injured, but no one answered. Only the sound of hurried breathing mixed with the heavy smell of blood. 22 blood-soaked men, each with eyes as bright as wild beasts, their expressions twisted with extreme excitement. "Good if no one is injured," the mountain said, then gathered his breath and roared, "Adam Marbrand! I am the mountain, get your ass out here!" The thunderous voice echoed in the sky above Marked Rock City, reverberating far along the streets in the night. "Adam Marbrand, get out here, here, here!"